We now come to backbench business, beginning with the debate on a motion relating to the regulation of the sale of puppies and kittens. To move the motion, I call Mr. Robert Flello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to lead today's debate on the issue that the British public feel very strongly about. Over 110,000 people have called for a ban on the sale of young puppies and kittens without their mother present, and whilst I can't cover all the very many issues around this topic, indeed I would like to leave some for the colleagues around on both sides of the chamber to cover in the time allowed, I hope at least to explain why so many people believe this to be such an important issue. Before doing so, I'd like to thank everybody involved in the Pup Aid campaign, in particular Mark the Vet Abraham, Stuart Vernon, Rebecca Weller, the team at Bellenden, Julia Carr at Canine Action UK, Tim Wass, Nicola Howell in my office, Cariad and Diesel. I'm also grateful for the backing of Blue Cross, Dog Rescue Federation, Dog Advisory Council, Dogs Trust, the Kennel Club, Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, Wood Green and the RSPCA. And I hear mutters on benches beside me about the mention of the word diesel. Until, and this shows I think the issue, until I actually saw for myself the problem, I was oblivious to it. And that is at the heart, I think, of the issue here, that people, unfortunately, are caring, considerate, loving individuals, oblivious to the problem.
Will my honourable friend give way?
I will indeed.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. Does he agree with me that in the first instance, if someone does want to get a dog, that they should seek a rescue animal? And if they really want to get a puppy, they shouldn't be going to a pet shop, but should seek advice on who are reputable dealers with puppies.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that, because I can now delete exactly that line from my speech, I couldn't have put it any better myself, because that's exactly how I did put it in my speech. Okay, I'm going to work from left to right, so yes, indeed.
And congratulating him on securing this debate today. But further to that point, does he agree with me? It's the rise of the internet that has led us to this situation where people are buying puppies and kittens online, and certainly they have been transported around the country, and that is where the problem, we need greater regulation.
I'm grateful to the honourable member for intervening, but I don't think that is the only problem, and as I will return to in my speech, that is one of the problems, but that's not what I'm seeking to address today.
To the honourable member giving way, and can I pay tribute, one, for winning this debate, and secondly for his long-standing contribution to animal welfare in the United Kingdom and indeed throughout the world. Does he agree with me that DEFRA needs to do far more than it's currently doing to get local authorities together, pet shop owners together, Dogs Trust and all the charities that he's mentioned, in order that we can have a collaborative and credible, realistic and achievable outcome to what he wants to see, rather than just small words from DEFRA?
Well said, Mark. Grateful. I will just pick up on that last point from the honourable gentleman. We don't just want warm words from DEFRA, we need some action. The honourable member.
I thank the honourable member for Secretary Trent for giving way and congratulate him on securing the debate today. Specifically on the issue of the motion. The motion calls for toughening up of government laws in this area. However, would he agree with me that there's real publicity that needs to come around those looking to get a puppy or, in fact, a kitten, to link into responsible breeders? For my dog, we approached the head of Standard Poodle Rescue, who's based in my constituency in Rossendale, who actually interviewed me and my wife 3 times before she would let us walk out with a puppy. Working with responsible breeders has to be publicised, as well as the government tightening up legislation.
Absolutely, and I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman for raising that point, because absolutely it's about making sure that not only is the dog suitable for the family is suitable for the dog. It's very important. The honourable member from Lichfield.
I'm delighted that the honourable gentleman has, the honourable gentleman of course is from Staffordshire, for securing this debate. This may seem an odd comparison, but you know, we've been so conscious of baby Asher separated from its parents, his parents, in Spain. You know, isn't the whole crux of this issue the separation of young puppies and kittens from their parents at such an early age? Isn't that the cruel element of it all?
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. That is certainly one of the cruel elements, but as we'll go on, hopefully in a moment in my speech, to elaborate why there are so many other cruel elements as well.
I'm very grateful, and I think it is extremely important that after this debate that we do get it right. I'm very concerned, though, that good people whose bitches have puppies are also not demonised in the way that people who are exploiting puppy trading are abusing the good nature of people who want a good dog. So going to a reputable person is probably where the problem lies.
Well, I think going to a reputable person actually is part of the solution, because I think the thing is that if you are a responsible, decent breeder who wants to make sure that the right family, coming back to one of his honourable colleagues' point, the right family has that dog, they will have invested a lot of time and money into raising those puppies, and they are being undercut by these unscrupulous breeders who care nothing for the animal themselves. Was the honourable gentleman indicating? Yes.
I congratulate the honourable member for raising this issue and bringing it to the House. It matters a great deal to a huge number of my own constituents who've written in on the issue. It's already been mentioned that local authorities have powers which they are often reluctant to use and perhaps don't even know they have. But it's not just a matter of extending the licensing regime. The licensing regime itself must be flawed, given that there are plenty of breeders whose standards don't even meet the first rung of the ladder, who nevertheless do have licenses. So the standard itself, the quality of the standard itself, also needs to be addressed.
I would add to the honourable gentleman's point, he makes it very well himself. I won't take any more interventions for a moment, just to make some progress as soon as I'm on the second page of the speech, but I will take further interventions. Mr. Speaker, we've heard, we consider ourselves to be a nation of animal lovers, where a dog is a man's best friend, a pet cat, a pet dog is part of the family. But every day, puppies and kittens are bought from pet shops and garden centres that become ill. All too frequently, they die as a result of the supply chain from irresponsible breeder to pet shop. Quite frankly, I can't think a nation of animal lovers would allow this to continue. Are we at risk of becoming a nation with disposable pets? Those behind this campaign today want to end the cruel and unnecessary practice of puppy farming. We want to work with government to find a solution that improves welfare for puppies and kittens, as well as protecting the animals' mothers and, importantly as well, their prospective owners. Tackling the supply side of this trade is difficult, we accept, but we can tackle the demand side by looking at where these animals are sold. There are, and the honourable gentleman referred to this, three main routes: the internet, the private dealer and retail outlets. In time, we do need to address the first of those two, which will be hard, but there is already strong agreement on tackling the third case: the high street premises, the garden centres, the high street pet shop, the dog supermarket like the one in Salford. Puppies and kittens are housed and sold without their mothers, and the presence of such retail outlets encourages impulsive buying, irresponsible breeding and commoditisation of these animals, as well as too often leaving prospective owners with the burden of life-threatening health and behavioural problems associated with pet shop puppies. Government can therefore have an immediate effect, without any excessive enforcement costs, by banning the sale of puppies and kittens on high street premises. Puppy farming, from which third-party dealers get most of their puppies and kittens, is the mass commercial production of puppies for profit, and is almost always without thought for the health, welfare, quality of life of the puppy and its parents. And, Mr. Speaker, I've referred to puppies quite a lot in this. I do mean puppies and kittens, but I'm doing it for brevity as best I can. I will just make a few more, and I will then take the intervention. Very often, puppies are separated from their mothers before the puppy is even 4 weeks old. 4 weeks, usually unvaccinated and insufficiently socialised. They're sent long distances across the country and indeed increasingly across the continent before being sold. But despite a Dogs Trust survey showing that 95% of the British public say they would never buy from a puppy farmer, it's clear each year many thousands of people have done exactly that without realising it. They simply don't know where the third-party dealer gets his or her stock from. The breeding dogs themselves are often kept in horrific conditions, with insufficient time to heal between litters. They are rarely screened for genetic conditions and therefore can pass on problems such as the agonising hip dysplasia and heart disease. Indeed, it's hardly in the interests of these volume breeders to produce animals that will live long lives. When the bitch is no longer able to breed, she is either killed or abandoned. It's only the lucky ones that find themselves in rehoming animal rescue centres. I will just take a few more pages of my speech, and then I will take, I think, 4 I'm up to so far. But this is just not just about the animal welfare, important as that is. Failing to tackle the sale of puppies from third-party dealers leaves potential dog owners exposed. They will be unaware of the puppy's background and unable to see their puppy interacting with its mother. This interaction is vital as it can help assess the mother's temperament and what that may indicate about the puppy. This includes the risk of aggressive behaviour and serious temperament problems in later life, as well as the health ramifications of the environment in which the puppy was bred. The owners are left to foot the bill, with treatment for parvovirus, for example, found in at least 1 in 5 bought from a pet shop, costing up to £3,000 to treat and often fatal. Ethical breeders that fulfil their responsibilities will have invested money and effort and will want to ensure that all their puppies are sold to appropriate homes. I will take the honourable lady first and then the gentleman there and then...
The honourable gentleman's been very gracious with giving way, and I congratulate him on and the team in getting this for the Backbench Committee to agree to this debate today. He's talked about the issues about licensing, and I wholeheartedly support the spirit behind the motion today. But can we just make sure that MPs are aware of the great work that local councils like my South Derbyshire District Council do as licensing authority on this? They are very, very good about going in, checking and making enforcement issues well known and publicising them locally. So I think perhaps as MPs we can all do more to help our local councils with their enforcement powers.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady. There are some very good local authorities indeed, but the issue here, I think even with the best of local authorities, a pet shop, a high street pet shop, is not the place to buy your puppy from. I'll take the Honourable Gentleman, then I'll come to our side.
I'm most grateful to the Honourable Gentleman and congratulate him on securing this very important debate. And just pertinent to his point about animals which are used purely to farm puppies, I'm sure he will have been to establishments like Battersea Dogs Home, and I think it's well worthwhile people actually attending Battersea Dogs Home to see bitches which have been over puppified and the enormous suffering they go through with hugely expanded nipples and an ongoing suffering, and I think that very graphically brings home what that means to the mother dog as well as the puppies.
Indeed, and the Honourable Gentleman is right. The treatment of these breeding bitches is absolutely unbelievably cruel, and it's the lucky ones that actually get themselves to places like Battersea. I'll take the Honourable Lady, then my Honourable colleague here.
Giving way and congratulate him for getting this important debate, and congratulate as well Mark the vet, who comes from my home city of Brighton and Hove, who's done so much on this agenda. We've heard about local authorities. They do very good work, but they are also under enormous pressure now in terms of their budgets. Does that not mean there's even more importance to make sure there is national action on this? The government itself's own advice says that people shouldn't buy a pup without seeing the mother. If that's the government's advice, do you not agree that they should just act on it now?
In a word, yes.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend both in securing this important debate and also for the very clear terms in which he put in his argument. The honourable lady from Brighton Pavilion in her intervention made a good point. But isn't it important that not only that local authorities are given the powers to regulate this trade properly, but also the resources to ensure that they can do so properly?
Indeed, the resources is an issue absolutely for local authorities, but where we think this will actually help is because this won't require additional resources. This will just simply say if you are a high street pet shop, you don't sell kittens and puppies.
Hundreds of my constituents are really grateful that we're having this debate today, and so thank you. I thank my honourable friend for having the debate. As part of your comment, part of the comments that were made, you talked about the temperament of puppies and temperament of the mother. Many breeders, particularly of the Staffordshire Bull type dogs, will deliberately remove those puppies sooner in order to instill in the puppies a temperament which suits their purpose, or the purpose they have for them. Would you agree this is absolutely abhorrent?
Yeah, I mean, this was the danger in trying to make a very short speech when actually you could quite easily cover a several-hour speech. But my honourable friend makes an extremely good point. I will come to the honourable gentleman. I'm working my way round to him.
Can I thank my honourable friend and congratulate him on both securing this debate, but also his excellent speech as well. I've had many constituents who contact me about it. One of the things that sort of struck me as listening to him, I would like to see more regulation myself, but isn't one of the problems we're just not getting the information out to people, to the public, to understand what the situation is and prevent this happening in the first place?
Information is absolutely important, but with the best information in the world, if you happen to be buying a container of of goldfish food from the local pet shop with your family and they see a cute puppy or a cute kitten, that's when a problem arises, that the impulse purchase. But my honourable friend makes a good point. I will take the honourable gentleman, and then I'm not going to take any more for a short while after that, just to make some progress.
I'm most grateful to the honourable gentleman, and I congratulate him on securing this debate and support the motion on behalf of the many constituents who contacted me. Can I make the simple point that surely, as DEFRA has gone through the process of traceability with cattle and sheep and other animals, the way forward ultimately must be a register and traceability of cats and dogs.
I'd like to see more work done in terms of the compulsory microchipping that's going to come in terms of actually having a proper database, that rather than just something that just sort of floats out in the ether and never gets updated and will just continue to grow and not be used properly. So I'm hoping that the Minister is listening very carefully and will have take the message back to DEFRA that the chip is a good thing, but actually it's the database behind it that's the important one. Forgive me, I am going to make some more progress. Coming back to high street pet shops, the only place that most of them can source their puppies and kittens has to be from breeders that put minimal effort into breeding and rearing, that sort of pile them high mentality. In addition, of course, to domestic operations, there's also a rapidly growing trend of selling puppies brought into the UK from overseas breeders. We hear of breeders in the Irish Republic, for example, with 1,000 breeding bitches, which dwarfs even some of the, sad to say, sitting alongside my Welsh colleagues, some of the Welsh breeders who have got more than 300. And whilst there are regulations in place to address the import of cats and dogs, I know from my own experience this summer how easily the Pets Passport system could be evaded, very, very easily. I also know from meeting with Eurotunnel and ferry companies that they are concerned about the situation. They are unhappy that they are effectively policing something that they don't have the training for, is not properly resourced, quite simply it doesn't work. It's ultimately the retail end of this chain, Mr. Speaker, which drives it, with up to 100 high street pet shops in England licensed to sell puppies or kittens on their premises, and that is responsible for pain and misery of thousands of animals. Whilst the number of pet shops selling puppies and kittens in the UK is relatively small, there are no signs of a downward trend. My intention is not from this motion to vilify pet shops per se, but in almost every case where they sell puppies and kittens, they simply can't meet the specific needs required in this developmental golden period for puppies to learn their future emotional template in order to exhibit normal behaviour patterns to safely adjust to family life, as well as all the health implications. Clear patterns have been established between early experiences and the development of aggression in dogs. A US study, for example, found that puppies obtained from pet shops were 3 times more likely to display aggression directed at their owner and almost twice as likely to show aggression to other dogs they didn't know, compared to dogs obtained from a small, responsible breeder. By tackling the sale of puppies and kittens in pet shops, we can remove the most impulsive means of purchasing, giving prospective owners the chance to research your ownership and everything that goes with it. We can protect these prospective owners from the health and behavioural problems associated with pet shop puppies and kittens. And we can take a big step towards, just one more moment and I will give my honourable friend a chance, and we can take a big step towards curbing irresponsible breeding practices and overproduction of puppies and kittens.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and congratulate him on securing this debate. And as you will know, since the very sad death of Jade Lomas Anderson in my constituency, I have done a great deal of work around this issue. Will he agree with me that we have to continue to talk about the 200,000 people that are seriously injured each year, the 6,000 that are hospitalised, and the number of people that are dying because we're not looking after dogs from birth and through their training? And it is dog welfare, absolutely at the heart of this, but also about protecting our communities.
I'm grateful to my own friend and commend the work that she has done in this area. And my thoughts, as ever, with the families of all those who have been affected by aggressive dogs. But as the survey shows, if you buy from a pet shop, you are so much more at risk. Don't take that risk. I will give way to the honourable gentleman, and then I'm going to make more progress.
The honourable gentleman for giving way and for his contribution for securing this debate, and particularly everything that he said in his speech. But I'd just like to ask him if he has considered that, apart from the regulation of the supply chain in the way that he's considering, which I fully support, that we as members of Parliament can help in the process of educating the purchasing public in being aware of the questions to ask at stores, because if the demand wasn't there and people were buying elsewhere from reputable breeders, the issue would simply disappear because people wouldn't buy them.
But the Honourable Gentleman makes a very good point. You know, if we can get one message out from today, as well as hopefully some action, it's where's Mum? Always ask where's Mum. Mr. Speaker, it couldn't... just once more.
I'm very grateful. He's being extremely generous, and really it's further to that intervention. One of the roles that members of Parliament can fulfil is promoting cat rescue and other similar dog-related institutions within their own constituencies, so that people know that they don't have to go to pet shops. There are voluntary organisations who will provide, for most people, perfectly good and living pets.
My honourable friend makes his point, and I would just again say yes. Madam Deputy Speaker, it couldn't be simpler. All prospective dog owners should first consider adopting from a reputable rescue shelter. His honourable colleague isn't in his place at the moment. But if they specifically want a puppy, source from a responsible breeder where puppy and mother will always be seen interacting together. We believe that powers already in place to tackle this issue are there, but such is the volume of often very old legislation, there is a need for clarification to ensure that loopholes can't be exploited. The 1951 Pet Animals Act doesn't require pet shop owners to highlight the provenance of its animals and only states that a local authority may inspect a premises. In financially constrained times, it's hardly surprising that these inspections are not a priority. The 1999 Breeding and Sale of Dogs Welfare Act requires third-party dealers selling puppies from licensed breeders to be sold with identification badges or tags. But because the 99 Act doesn't form part of the pet shop licensing conditions, it's generally not enforced. The 99 Act actually enables breeders to sell puppies to a third-party dealer at younger than 8 weeks old. This is beneficial, of course, for the breeder, who doesn't incur the costs of inoculating or caring for the animal, and for the dealer, who pays less for the dog. It certainly isn't in the interest of the animal or its potential owner. Subsection 4 of the 99 Act even provides a bit of a get-out-of-jail-free card, saying as long as they took reasonable precautions, then that's fine, they didn't commit an offence. And then we have the Animal Welfare Act 2006. Largely it hasn't been used, nor has the secondary legislation that's in place to make it effective. Section 14 of the Act refers to codes of practice and guidance, but there is no liability if they're not observed. There are huge, I will come back to the Animal Welfare Act 2006, which was that enabling piece of legislation. Again, one of the things we want is the government to switch it on, make it work. The entire system desperately needs overhauling, but in the meantime, one clear route to market for the puppy farms can be shut down, and we can take a big step towards it today. The 1951 Act states that a local authority shall have, quotes, discretion to withhold a licence on other grounds. The former Minister of State for Agriculture and Food stated in a written answer last year that, in his view, conditions can be placed on individual pet shop licences restricting the animals that can be sold. This point, however, is contested. We would like the Minister to clarify on the record what the situation is, given that PupAid's own research shows that over half of local authorities are unaware that they are even empowered to act to amend licensing conditions and stop the sale of puppies and kittens. It's the unanimous position of leading animal welfare organisations that the sale of puppies and kittens from retail premises should be banned. This is a regulatory change which inflicts no additional burden on local authorities and matches their own desire to clamp down on irresponsible breeding practices. Indeed, it's consistent, as we've heard, with DEFRA's own advice to prospective owners that if you're buying a puppy or kitten, you should ask to see it with its mother and the rest of the litter, and be satisfied that it is the mother and that it's not just a dog that's been brought in for show purposes. I will, as soon as I'm almost at the end of my speech.
Thank you. Can I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way? At a recent meeting which I had with the Friends of Wyndham Square in Stonehouse, they were explaining to me about a number of people who are on benefits who actually end up by breeding dogs in order to be able to try and make some cash money as well. And do you not think that that is something which also should be looked at as well?
I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman. Not only do I think it's something that should be looked at, I actually wrote to HMRC and DWP, and their response was very disappointing. Both departments wrote back and basically said, well, if you know of specific cases, report them, otherwise we won't do anything. No, actually I think we need to see proper from the top policy, having a go through HMRC, those who are not paying tax, and through DWP, those who are not declaring it for other purposes. And let's have a national campaign on that. So let me reiterate what I would like to hear from the Minister today. Firstly, will the Minister confirm that local authorities are already empowered to amend licensing conditions and ban outright the sale of puppies and kittens in pet shops? And will he require, secondly, local authorities to tackle this issue using those existing powers? And thirdly, if those powers are in doubt, Then, given that Chapter 13 of the Animal Welfare Act 2006 on licensing activities involving animals was explicitly designed to amend the 1951 Pet Animals Act, will the government use those powers to bring forward the secondary legislation to address this issue? Madam Deputy Speaker, every day hundreds of healthy, adorable cats and dogs are destroyed, while at the same time hundreds of kittens and puppies are born in squalid pain and despair to satisfy, amongst others, the high street pet shops. Today is the first step of a campaign to show we are a nation of animal lovers. This evil trade must end. Today the Minister can be bold and begin to end this trade. Thousands of animals' lives are at stake. Minister, take that step with us. Make that change happen today. Thank you.
The question is, as on the order paper, and I would remind the House that there is a limit of 5 minutes on backbench speeches because, as the House will be aware, there is a high demand from members to take part in this important debate. Miss Anne McIntosh.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I congratulate the honourable gentleman for Stoke-on-Trent South for securing this debate, which is very timely. I would like to refer to our report on the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee and the government response on our report to that on dog control and welfare, welcoming my honourable friend to his position and hope that his views have not changed too much since he contributed to that report. I would particularly like to resonate with what the honourable gentleman for Stoke-on-Trent South said in moving this debate, that we do need to have a review of existing regulation. In the limited time available, I'd like to make some brief points. I think he's highlighted the role of self-regulation. I'm slightly confused as to why a great deal of emphasis in the honourable gentleman's speech was on pet shops, because my understanding is that pet shops are the one part of the trade that is pretty much regulated, and in the evidence that we received in our report, which is obviously published together with our recommendations, the 1951 Pet Animals Act pretty much covers that, and it would be interesting to hear further, perhaps from the Minister in his remarks, if he's had any representations where that Act could be improved and reviewed. I'd also like to invite the Minister, in responding to this debate, to update us on the government's response to our report that the government is working with the Pet Advertising Advisory Group on the issue of sales of pets online, and in particular that the government was supporting that work to develop a voluntary code of practice. I think the key to this voluntary code succeeding is that it must go to the heart of good animal welfare. The message that I think should go forward from the House today is that there is a role for self-regulation. Surely to any responsible potential dog or cat owner, we should not be buying puppies or kittens where the mother is not present. That is so self-evident. Do we need to legislate that? Is that something that we just need to go out and educate the public on? I'd like to congratulate all the charities involved who's obviously briefed the Select Committee in the context of our report, briefed all of us on the work that they do. But I think it's important to recognise the work, not an exhaustive list, but the Blue Cross in my own constituency, Battersea Dogs and Cats Home here, the Dogs Trust, the Dog Rescue Federation, the wonderfully named and apt Four Paws, and really pay tribute to those who fund these charities, because in funding these charities, it is taking a lot of the work of these stray dogs and cats off our streets. I believe that we've got to ask the government and ask the Minister today to tackle the rogue backstreet breeders and the rogue importers from puppy farms across other parts, often of the European Union. I hope that the Minister will take this opportunity to update the House today on internet advertising and where we are with the voluntary code. I think we've got to do everything possible, each and every one of us, to discourage irresponsible dog breeders. And I think we've got to set a lower threshold for licensing breeders than currently stands. And one query I'd like to personally raise with the Minister, whether his views have changed since he made such a positive and welcome contribution to our discussions and debate in adopting our report on dog control and welfare, whether he still holds to the view that 5 litters should be the maximum. This was his personal view, and I think we benefited from his very sterling contribution to our report, that 5 litters within the legislation should be considered, if you like, the maximum that beyond which really the bitch was obviously not going to be in a very good state for giving further litters. Has his view changed since he was with us on the committee that he'd like to share with us? In our conclusion, just to remind the House, we said that 5 litters per year is too high. Absolutely. And that we recommended that breeding no more than 2 litters per year should be actually written on the face of licence. Also that we'd like to support the public contracts for giving better publicity. Now I commend our report and recommendations to the House.
Order. Meg Munn.
Very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to take part in this debate. I'm grateful to the Backbench Committee for granting this debate and congratulate my honourable friend for Stoke-on-Trent on securing it and on his excellent speech, which has covered many of the issues. Many of my constituents have urged me to support this debate and to take part in it.
My old friend give way.
Very quick.
Wait for it. I think many of us are here because of the weight of opinion that our constituents have given to us. But I just wanted to ask my honourable friend, it feels to me like we have been here before. I'm thinking about wild animals in circuses where I think the action is still not forthcoming. I'm thinking about the badger where the will of the House was very clearly expressed. What would she say in urging the government to actually not just listen to this debate but take it seriously and heed the weight of opinion we've received from our constituents to actually follow this up with some action?
Well, my honourable friend's early intervention leads me really on to my next point. Over the summer, we've been very concerned, and rightly concerned, with the terrible human tragedies that are taking place around the world, in the Middle East, in Ukraine, in parts of Africa. And some people might come to us and say, why should animal welfare have such a priority and be such an important issue when there is so much else going on in the world? Well, when that issue is raised, I say, look at William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce, one of the great humanitarians, a great MP. Coincidentally, I was born 200 years to the day after him. He had... Spooky. I'll finish my point. He had his eyes fixed not only on ending the slave trade and ending slavery, but also on animal welfare, along with a number of other people, including other MPs. He was a founder of what then was the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, obviously subsequently the RSPCA, which has been such a force for good in terms of animal welfare. It should never be one or the other. A civilised society respects not only the welfare and human rights, but also the rights of animals, and therefore we should very much support this motion and do what we can on this. I wish to make some progress. The issue that brings us here is the issue of profit and the issue of money in this. Many of us have got our pets from organisations that are about animal welfare. We get them from friends, we get them from colleagues. That's certainly been true in the case of my family. Our current 2 cats, Polly and Lucy, who no doubt will be delighted to find themselves in Hansard, came from the...
They read it.
came from the Cat Protection League, and the process that we went through was fairly rigorous. We had a visit to our home. We then had to follow the proper processes to ensure their subsequent welfare, and that is a very normal process. But it's very different when buying animals, and I'll certainly give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady, and it's amazing ingenuity to bring Iraq, Ukraine and the slave trade into a debate on puppy farming, but I entirely support the thrust of what she's saying. But on an important point, we haven't spoken yet about rescue dogs or cats, and it's all about puppies. But I was brought up in a household where we almost always took on rescue dogs, and we need more people to look at that option rather than wanting a nice fluffy puppy from a shop.
Well, the honourable gentleman can't have heard other people raise that, but there have been a number of points when people have, when honourable members on both sides have raised those issues, and for some of us, it certainly has always been that motivation to go to those organisations first, and indeed those organisations also do have puppies and kittens. I've visited the RSPCA Centre in Sheffield. It's a fabulous building, and it's looking after animals well. And it also takes very seriously that responsibility for proper aftercare. It makes sure that the people who are coming to take on these pets understand what's involved, they're available for advice and support, and I entirely agree that this is a good way to go forward. But of course not everybody does go down that route, and so my honourable friend is right to bring forward this debate and to look at the options when money and profit enters the situation. We need to always be conscious that when we have a profit motive in there, there will be people who are unscrupulous, and they will do different things. And as the legislation changes and tries to keep up with it, they will become ever more clever at getting round that, at looking at ways that they can make that profit. So I think there are a number of things that need to be done. Raising awareness is enormously important, and just having this debate will do that. It will put this story into people's minds. It will appear in newspapers. It will be on the internet. People will be looking at this, and they will be learning about what they may unwittingly be involved in when they buy a pet from a pet shop or even from dealers. They will be empowered to understand the questions that they should ask and to be clearer about what they need to know before they take on the important role of looking after a pet. So support is needed for government to work harder on this. I absolutely agree with honourable friends who have already, and honourable members opposite who have spoken on this already. Government needs to do more. My honourable friend has set out how some of that could be done quite quickly, and I urge the government to take this forward.
Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Thank you for allowing me to catch your eye on this well-attended and important cross-party debate. And I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Stockton South for having obtained it. And I think that a lot of the issues that he's raised I agree with. I also pay tribute to my constituent Carol Fowler, who's been campaigning on this issue for a long number of years. Her campaign led to the TV documentary Pedigree Dogs Exposed, which raised such disturbing issues on dog breeding that BBC temporarily suspended the showing of Crufts the following year. But let me start by the issue of puppy farms. We need the government to introduce strategies for improving conditions on puppy farms. The Dog Advisory Council, who I also pay tribute to, and Professor Sheila Crispin, who runs it, made recommendations on regulation and legislation issues to address these issues and to reduce red tape in relation to puppy farms. We do have poor conditions in puppy farms, and they need to be addressed by the provisions in the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, which produces a duty of care on the person responsible for pet animals and must be enforced. Let me just go through some of the issues in puppy farms that have already been rehearsed in this debate, but I think they are so shocking often that they need rehearsing even more. There's often a failure to provide veterinary care, including vaccinations, simple health checks, lack of exercise, stimulation, socialisation for both puppies and parents, and generally unsuitable breeding establishments, often in buildings which are not fit for purposes. And if they don't have suitable exercise, they're much more likely to suffer from problem behaviours. and the puppies are often taken away prematurely from their mothers, and as the point well made to my right by the honourable member to my right here, the mother is often then expected to produce another litter and is left exhausted from repeated breeding. I give way to my
very grateful to my friend for giving way, and I also have a number of constituents who've been campaigning very hard on this issue, and hopefully they made common cause with his constituents as well. Does he agree with me that the role of the pet shops and the pet stores is absolutely crucial, and they should be putting more pressure on the relevant agencies and other bodies?
I do agree with that, but on the other hand, as the honourable, my honourable friend, the chairman of the Select Committee, has already made clear, there is legislation that can legislate pet shops, and I think a lot of the thrust in this debate is calling for new legislation. I would actually say to my honourable friend on the front bench, let's make sure we enforce the existing legislation better, and then we might all get on a lot better. So many of the health problems, from infectious diseases such as parvovirus to internal and external parasites, and a range of breed-related and inherited diseases such as heart diseases and epilepsy and glaucoma, come from poor puppy farms. It's crucial that puppy farms are not only properly licensed, as I've just said, but also properly scrutinised, which the powers are there to scrutinise them, so we can root out the ones operating with inappropriate conditions. We need to enforce, as I say, existing legislation better. Secondly, I'd like to turn to the issue of dog breeding, which I've already raised. The breeding of dogs for specific desirable traits can result in serious genetic health problems as a result of inbreeding and closed gene pools. The body shape of some dog breeds can cause immense suffering. And as I say, under the Animal Welfare Act, it's illegal to beat a dog with a stick, but there's nothing illegal to stop breeding mating dogs to produce suffering, which the offspring will suffer from. Thirdly, as has already been mentioned in this debate, and time is limited, I would like to commend to my honourable friend the issue of puppy contracts produced by the RSPCA and the BVA Animal Welfare Foundation. These should be adopted by all breeders, because too often buyers are not aware of the possible genetic problems related to poor welfare and breeding conditions. Fourthly, the Animal Health and Welfare Board for England, which was set up by this government, could be in a perfect position to assist with the welfare of dogs. However, its performance to date has not met the desired level. The board should take a more active interest in the welfare of dogs, which at the moment it does not do, and I would ask the government to give the Animal Health and Welfare Board a role in devising light touch regulation, ideally based on the Dog Advisory Council's recommendation on regulations under the Animal Welfare Act, so that we can see active improvement in the welfare of dogs. The Dogs Advisory Council, under Professor Sheila Crispin's chairmanship, was founded entirely through the generosity of patrons, principally the Dogs Trust, the RSPCA, Blue Cross and the FSDA. It's operated with a budget of only £25,000, yet the government gives the Farm Animal Welfare Council £225,000. There does seem to be a slight imbalance within DEFRA between farm animals and companion animals, and I hope that my honourable friend on the front bench will take this back from today's debate. If nothing else, we are a nation of animal lovers. We do need to take the welfare of companion animals such as dogs and cats more seriously. Whilst it is obviously welcome that microchipping will be mandatory from April 2016, I would ask the Minister whether it is possible to bring this date forward. We need a comprehensive list of registered dogs as soon as possible, and I do not see why we're delaying for another 2 years. We currently have more than 100,000 dogs stolen, abandoned or lost each year. And this is a huge emotional turmoil for the owners. If a person abandons a dog, it's a crime. And fairly urgent introduction of microchipping will help us dramatically reduce the numbers of dog strays on our streets. I'll get way.
I thank him for giving way. He's been very generous, and I know time's short. I'm hoping he'll get an extra minute as recompense. I agree with him entirely. This is about enforcement of the laws we've already got. Isn't one of the key issues inspection? And what we need is random inspections and a zero tolerance approach where there's clear breaches of these standards already in place.
My friend's exactly right. Enforce the existing legislation with random inspections so that the owners and operators of puppy farms don't know when the inspectors are coming, and that will hopefully ginger them up into better standards. The Minister will also need to address an amendment made to the deregulation bill during the committee stage, which seeks to remove the requirement under the Breed of Dogs Act 1973 for local authorities, when deciding whether to grant a dog breeding licence, to have regard to the need for securing that dog breeding records be kept in a prescribed form and to specify licence conditions to secure that objective. The Dog Advisory Council has written to the Cabinet Office and DEFRA ministers asking them to reconsider this decision to repeal the relevant provisions as a matter of urgency, because not to do so would further undermine the effectiveness of the existing legislation. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, you've been very generous with your time. This has been an important debate. I hope the Minister will take away with him that we are a nation of dog lovers. We need to enforce the existing legislation. There is too much cruelty in relation to the dog world in this country.
Sharon Hodgson. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak in this very important debate this afternoon. And as my inbox attests to, it is an extremely important issue for many of my constituents, not to mention myself as a dog owner to the lovely Springer Spaniel Leo, who is our adopted dog. We adopted him at 7 months old and he's now, oh gosh, nearly 9. I'll also begin by paying tribute to my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, and his colleagues for securing this debate and indeed for introducing it so well. I also pay tribute to the members of the EFRA Select Committee for their report on dog control and welfare. As I think any dog lover or pet lover would agree, the crux of this matter is that we simply cannot see dogs, or kittens for that matter, as commodities. They are not an asset or a piece of capital from which a producer seeks to extract as much financial gain as possible. They are future members of our families, future best friends for our children, future companions for ourselves when those children flee the nest. They are sentient beings which have very similar feelings and reactions to ourselves. We wouldn't stand for our children being mistreated in the way some domestic animals are at birth, ripped apart from their mother and the nurture she instinctively provides. We wouldn't stand for that because we know how that kind of trauma affects them later in life, whether that's their personality, their health, or indeed both. We all want to encourage more responsible dog ownership, and I can't think of any responsible dog owner who would be happy in the knowledge that their new puppy or kitten, which they thought had been bought from a reputable breeder or at least from a pet shop which deals exclusively with responsible breeders, had actually had such a traumatic start in life. I will.
Thank you, Honourable Friend, for giving way. And she's very right to point out that very often the people that are purchasing these animals don't realise at all the background of where the animals come from. There was a report by the RSPCA saying that breeders in Eastern Europe and Ireland were selling so-called handbag dogs, you know, the sort of little chihuahuas and things that the likes of Paris Hilton carry around in their handbags. The breeders were only charging about £25 each for them, but they're then being sold on for between £800 to £1,500. So obviously the people paying £1,500 for such a dog think that they're getting a dog that is, you know, very much top of the market, it's been very well looked after, and that's not the case.
Yes, she highlights it. My honourable friend highlights a very important point, because often those dogs then go on to have terrible health conditions, which then cost the loving owner a fortune in vet's fees to to mitigate against some of those terrible breeding practices that the poor puppy suffered in its early life. Of course, the breeding and sale of puppies and other animals does provide a living, and in some cases a good living for a number of people. And the vast majority of breeders chose that as a way of life because they actually love animals and love the joy that they can bring to the families that they go to. And of course, many are very, very particular about ensuring that their puppies are going to a good and loving home. So I wouldn't want to see their lives made more difficult by any change in the law, but I am sure that they would also be the first to agree with us that we must ensure that the law is strong enough to be able to stamp out the minority of breeders in this country who don't share their high standards of care. I know that my constituents are particularly concerned about the sale of puppies in pet shops without their mothers present, and I understand that, again, this practice only persists in a very small minority of pet shops in the UK, about 2% according to Pet Care Trust. But nonetheless, I agree with my constituents that I would like to see this practice ended completely. It's been pointed out that some councils have successfully eradicated this practice in their areas through their licensing requirements. But just like buying a car, a pet is a kind of purchase that people are prepared to go further afield to make. Indeed, my dog Leo, who I mentioned earlier, he's an Essex boy. We travelled all the way to Essex to adopt him. So although those actions are welcome, you know, they are not in the grand scheme of things. They mean little if all councils, all surrounding councils, don't feel able to follow suit. So that is why I do therefore think it is worth looking at what more can be done at central government level to spread this best practice across the country. I don't know what the right balance is between regulations and which are enforceable and effective but don't represent an onerous duty on local authorities or other agencies, or place unnecessary restrictions on the many good and responsible caring breeders out there. What I do know, it is clear that we are not striking that balance at the moment. I'll give way.
I was very interested in the Honourable Lady's point about regulation, and whilst there is a role for central government, would she agree too that there's much more that can be done by organisations such as the Local Government Association, where the local government sector itself can collaborate to spread around best practice, which some councils have and others do not, because this is an issue, as she rightly observes, that runs right across the country, and it's important that we have the best possible knowledge out there to sometimes quite hard-pressed local authority enforcement arms.
The Honourable Gentleman is quite right and obviously has some expertise in this area. There are councils that do have great best practice, and it is important that we do disseminate and share that. The other area I would like to mention is public awareness. You know, often the public, as my honourable friend mentioned, are not aware that, you know, that these are an issue, that these issues exist, and think that when they're buying a puppy from or a kitten from wherever they're buying it from, that, you know, it will have been taken care of and nurtured and loved in the right way. So we need these welfare standards and to be made, for the public to be made more aware of what legislation does exist, and also that, you know, they can have confidence where it does exist, and also demand that the puppies are being bred in a, you know, in a fair and just way. So I therefore wholeheartedly support the calls in the motion before us today for a review of the existing legislation around breeding and sale, and I'm pleased that my colleagues on the front bench are committed to undertaking such a review if we form the next government. But given that the election is 8 months away and countless numbers of puppies and kittens will be born and sold between now and then, I hope that the government will listen to the cross-party calls we've heard today, and indeed to the thousands and thousands of people who've signed the petition, and announce that they will instigate a review forthwith. Thank you.
Roger Williams.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I too pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South for bringing this to the attention of the House, and it has certainly created a huge amount of interest across the country. The purpose of the debate, as I understand it, right at the core of the debate, is the aim to encourage the government to consider legislation making it illegal to sell puppies and kittens in pet shops. Already local authorities have the power to do that if the conditions of the retail outlet is poor, but this would be an outright ban, and I must say I have considerable sympathy for that and would urge the government to consider it. Such is the demand for cheap pedigree puppies and kittens, and indeed all puppies and kittens for presents for young people and children, that unscrupulous breeders and dealers of pets are able to make large amounts of money without having any consideration for the welfare of the animals. It is said that many of the so-called puppy farms are based in Cardigan and Carmarthenshire. And I know that the Welsh Assembly Government and local authorities in that area are working hard to bring in regulations to ensure that the conditions are suitable for breeding these animals. I must say that I think it's very important that we use cross-border cooperation in dealing with these, because many of the animals bred in Wales end up being sold in parts of England. Of course, the subject of today's debate is puppies and kittens, but yesterday the EFRA Select Committee took evidence on the problem of horse welfare. The same concerns were raised about the indiscriminate breeding of horses and ponies, which are expensive to keep and are often abandoned when the first enthusiasm to own them disappears and the cost becomes more apparent. The organisations that are promoting today's debate make the very good point that conditions for neonatal animals are very important to ensure that they stay healthy and have sufficient time with their mothers before weaning. Early weaning, which allows the bitches to be bred from again, means that many pups suffer from undernourishment and poor nutrition. I have a case in my constituency of an owner of Great Danes who were not breeding them indiscriminately, but with careful consideration for the genetic well-being of the animals and their sale afterwards. Nevertheless, the challenges of maintaining these large animals with a litter of 12 rapidly growing pups proved too much for their management skills, and the pups suffered from a number of complaints related to unhygienic conditions. In the end, the RSPCA intervened and removed the pups, which were then kept at considerable cost to the owner. I must emphasise that these were considerate and responsible owners, not just interested in money-making. But you can imagine the conditions that persist on some puppy farms where up to 200...
Will my honourable friend give way?
Yes, indeed.
I thank my honourable friend giving way, and particularly on what my honourable friend is saying, doesn't that emphasise that the local authorities not only have a very important role to play, but they must actually ensure that they do play that role to inspect these farms, both puppy farms and kitten farms?
Yeah, I absolutely accept the point that my honourable friend is making. I think the other point to make as well, though, is that there are considerable limitations on the amount of resources that local authorities can use for these purposes. Can I just say that in Wales, compulsory microchipping is being brought in for dogs from March 2015, next year. And the same regulations will apply, I believe, in England in 2016. If we made it compulsory to microchip pups within the first few weeks of their lives, if anything happened to those pups, then they could be traced back to where they were bred and action taken against any breeders who were found to be operating in conditions that weren't suitable for those pups. And any pups showing signs of malnutrition or disease could be traced to their place of birth. I recently attended an event held by a Dogs Trust, the Dogs Trust, in the Royal Welsh Agricultural Show's site in Llanelwedd in my constituency. There was a massive dog show attracting dogs from right around the country. But the point that the Dogs Trust was making is that microchipping can be had free and for no cost. And I think even before it becomes compulsory, all responsible dog owners should have their dogs microchipped. Buying a pup is a very serious business and one that should not be undertaken lightly. If someone buys a horse, for instance, they employ a vet to examine the animal to make sure that it's fit and healthy. That would be very good if it is replicated during the purchasing of puppies and kittens. But I'm not wanting to make pet ownership too overburdened with regulation and bureaucracy. Nevertheless, people should be educated into the responsibilities of making such purchases. Pets are very demanding in the amount of time that is necessary to look after them properly, and very expensive in terms of feeding and maintaining their health through veterinary care. I get a lot of letters from constituents who are very concerned about the costs of veterinary treatment. But I think that tightening up on the regulation revolving around the breeding and the sale of puppies and kittens is very important, and I support that. But I also commend the work that charities do in emphasising the importance of taking decisions on pet ownership very seriously.
Jonathan Edwards.
Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to associate myself with comments made by honourable members on all sides of this House today, deploring the barbaric treatment of kittens and puppies who are mass-produced in so-called farms, and regrettably there have been many cases in my home county of Carmarthenshire. This debate, of course, is taking place as a result of the 112,000 members of the public who signed an e-petition setting out their concerns. These e-petitions are one of the positive reforms introduced in 2011 and offer the public a direct means of engaging with what is discussed in this House. I am certainly glad that we are having this debate today and hope that ministers will act on what is said. As a lover of animals myself, and one who cohabits with a cat, a dog, 2 rabbits and a fish, and not to mention the 5 horses which my wife owns, I was particularly horrified to learn that puppies and kittens bred in these farms are almost always separated from their mothers too early, are held in appalling conditions and are sold on an unregulated market. Prospective owners are often duped into believing that the mother has been kept with the kittens or puppies, when in fact those selling the animals use fake mothers to pose with the little ones in cages to mask the neglect with which these animals have gone through. As a result of the poor conditions in which they're bred, the animals are likely to suffer from a weakened immune system, shorter lifespans and develop behavioural issues which stem from a lack of trust in their owners. The UK Government's response to the e-petition to date has been a statement from DEFRA, which claims that the existing laws and regulations contained in the Breeding and Sale of Dogs Welfare Act 1999, the Breeding of Dogs Act 1973 and 1991, and the Animal Welfare Act of 2006 are robust enough to deal with the problem, citing, for example, the law which requires dog breeders to obtain licences from their local authority, and that it is against the law for hobby breeders to cause unnecessary suffering to an animal. It is, however, evident that the current system is not working, and that animals are being exposed to needless suffering. In Wales, animal welfare is devolved and a matter for the National Assembly and the Welsh Government. In August last year, the Welsh Government launched a consultation which centred on dog breeding legislation, which asked whether changes should be made to dog-to-staff ratios in kennels, and specifically whether 1 full-time attendant should be required for every 20 adult dogs, or 1 part-time attendant should be required for every 10 adult dogs. The proposed draft Animal Welfare Breeding of Dogs Wales Regulations 2013 were brought forward under Section 13 of the Animal Welfare Act 2006 and sought to repeal the Breeding of Dogs Act 1973 in relation to Wales. The regulations as drafted, Madam Deputy Speaker, will be enforceable by Welsh local authorities. Under the provisions, local authorities would have to be satisfied that dogs and their puppies will be kept in acceptable conditions prior to granting a licence. Those seeking to breed dogs would need to show that they would be providing adequate nutrition, bedding and exercise facilities. The regulations also specifically make mention of the welfare of puppies and provide for a socialisation programme aimed at ensuring puppies bred in approved premises are able to socialise with other animals and people so that they do not go on to develop behavioural problems. Yeah.
Does he share my concern that a lot of the onus on enforcing these regulations, carrying out inspections, are on local authorities, and also trading standards have brought some successful prosecutions, but we know that both local authorities and trading standards, in particular my area, are really under pressure, they're really stretched and they don't have the resources available to do this. How can we address that?
Well, I think that's an extremely fair point. We know in Wales that local authorities next year are looking at a 4% cut in their budget from what the Minister said. And if we are passing on these added responsibilities, and as I said, in Carmarthenshire we've got a major issue in my home county, then resources need to come to match those responsibilities. Finally, the regulations also stipulate that puppies cannot be sold until they are at least 8 weeks old and have been microchipped, as my honourable colleague said earlier. In December of last year, the Welsh Government brought forward draft legislation and laid out their intention to proceed with the proposed staff to adult dog ratio of 1 to 20. The Minister said that the introduction of regulations was scheduled for February of this year, though I'm not sure what progress has been made since the announcement. Indeed, I would welcome any comments from the UK Government Minister as to what, if any, discussions have been held with representatives from the devolved administrations on bringing forward changes to regulations concerning the breeding and farming of animals intended as domestic pets. Evidently, members of the public feel very strongly about this issue, and I empathise with their concerns. Those who signed the e-petition call for this government to introduce regulations whereby the selling of kittens and puppies should be banned unless their mothers are present. Puppy and kitten farming is an abhorrent practice which must be stopped. I urge both the Welsh and UK governments to listen to the public and act on their concerns.
Alex Shelbrook.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, as a dog lover, I will be focusing my comments today on dogs. Madam Deputy Speaker, dogs have a unique bond with us humans. Our two dogs, Boris and Maggie, have a loyalty, a love, a calming nature through exercise, and of course the comfort a dog can give you.
My dogs then.
When doesn't surprise me. And really, Madam Deputy Speaker, the point there is, when your dogs, animals need medical attention, you worry about them like you would any other member of the family, and that's an important point to make. I think probably for the first and last time, Madam Deputy Speaker, I can stand in this House and say that Boris's bad behaviour, was improved immensely when I had him castrated. I will. But in seriousness, Madam Deputy Speaker, the reason I raise that point is because he did have a castration operation when he was younger, and that night he got constant attention because there is, obviously, they are like a member of your family, and it is important that you just naturally give that care. And of course, therefore, the public, when we go out and we buy animals, we need to expect that those animals are getting a healthy start in life, that they're well looked after, and that we can understand where they're coming from. Madam Deputy Speaker, in hindsight, my wife believes that our dog Maggie did actually come from a puppy farming background. She, when we got her, had health, and for the first period of her life had some behavioural problems. We sorted out the health problems through vet's bills and medical care, and she's a very healthy animal now. And indeed, some 2 years old she is now, her behaviour is very good. In fact, she's a very loving and caring animal. But that's taken a lot of love and care and attention from my wife and I to allow her to feel secure, allow her to feel comfort and not feel threatened. Madam Deputy Speaker, how many families would be willing to put that level of love and care into an animal? It's all I'll give way to my honourable friend first.
Why can't Conservative backbenchers be given the same love and care?
I would say to my honourable friend, I think that depends which side of the House you're on. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend. Could I just say to him, for the record, that I and my office have received more emails and letters on this than any other issue of the last few weeks, and I very much hope he will agree with me the strength of feeling that there exists on this issue amongst our constituents.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for that remark, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I think what he highlights there is that the reason we've all had so much communication on this issue does come back to my point that puppies, kittens, animals we bring into our lives do fundamentally become part of our families. And I think we would do a disservice, and as one of the honourable members opposite has said, that we wouldn't expect to have any sort of ill behaviour towards a human being in our family. Many people feel the same bond with their animals, and that they want to make sure that they are properly cared for and looked after. And as I said earlier on to the honourable member from Stoke-on-Trent, if you go to areas like Battersea Dogs Home, or indeed the Dogs Trust in my constituency, who do outstanding work, and you see some of the consequences of bad behaviour, terrible care, and what that leads to, you cannot help be moved. Now, the Dogs Trust in my constituency do outstanding work, but their resources are limited. And if you are faced with a situation that my wife and I were faced with our dog Maggie, how many families give up on that, think they'll give it to the Dogs Trust or somewhere else? But actually, let's be absolutely under no illusions here. The chances are, in many occasions, that dog will be killed. You know, I use the word killed because to put down or destroy doesn't have the same impact as the animal will be killed. And that's why that we need to make sure that we get ourselves into a position where we're not facing those sort of consequences. We're trusting, and families offering love and care find themselves in a position of they simply cannot care for that animal. As I said, many constituents with me have raised this issue, but they specifically raised an issue about a pet supermarket in Leeds called Dogs for Us. There have been petitions made to Leeds City Council asking them to remove the licensing to hold dogs in the Dogs for Us puppy supermarket, and indeed the City Council have looked at that. Now, I went further and did the research and looked at the Dogs for Us website, where they on their website refute these allegations and actually make reference to an internet campaign saying that we've had these allegations and we can assure you that these aren't real. The truth will lie somewhere in the middle, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I have not got any primary evidence to suggest that these activities are going on, but I do have a lot of secondary evidence. But I think that draws to a bigger picture. I think that draws to the fact that what the public are looking for is faith in the inspection regime and the licensing system, because if that faith was there, then they would have faith that if anything was going on in puppy farming, etc., that they would be able to track it down and that the local authorities would be able to bring it to a stop. So I urge the Minister today, as he takes on board all of the comments made, to take a close, strong look at the suggestions which are made today in terms of licensing, in terms of inspection, and make sure that it can be renewed, refreshed, redefined, and give the public the faith that it needs to make sure that poor practices and indeed criminality and downright cruelty can be eradicated and the public can make sure that they're A dog, Madam Deputy Speaker, is one of the most loyal, rewarding, life-saving, creates a healthy lifestyle through exercise and becomes an integral member of the family. And I don't apologise for focusing on dogs. And I know that the same thing can be said of cat lovers and kittens. I'm focusing on dogs as a dog lover. We must do all we can to eradicate any cruelty and harm that kills puppies and kittens and eventually can bring the heartbreak to the loving and caring families who go out there expecting to bring an integral part of their family together, only to find through a con at the beginning they ultimately lead to heartbreak. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Jim Fitzpatrick.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the honourable gentleman from Elnett and Rothwell. Always good to follow a fellow West Ham United supporter in any debates in this place. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to congratulate all the colleagues who lobbied for this debate, but especially my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent South, and to congratulate him on an excellent speech, to thank the Backbench Business Committee for the opportunity to have this debate, and also to a number of constituents, dozens of whom who have emailed me asking me to follow the debate and to participate, especially Peter and Annie Walker, who I know are following it closely themselves this afternoon. I want to thank all the animal welfare groups in the motion, especially the Dogs Trust, whose briefing I have relied upon heavily in terms of the remarks that I want to make. And I do hope to be brief, Madam Deputy Speaker, given a number of colleagues who do want to contribute. I only want to make a few points and ask a few questions, all of which I think have pretty much already been raised. What struck me was, among the briefings from all the different groups, the similarity and the consistency of the points that were raised. The conditions of puppies in breeding establishments, the restrictions on the number of litters, the consistency for inspectors on visits, easier and clearer enforcement of legislation for local authorities, draft Welsh Government briefing regulations which have been published, the use of microchips for tracking puppies to breeders, the updating of sales legislations to address the internet, and enforcement and implementation of the pet travel scheme regulations, particularly in respect of illegal imports. And I just want to... I'm happy to give way to my honourable friend.
I just want to ask on that last point, does he think the changes to the pets scheme due to come into force later this year are sufficient? Or do we not really have to have a closer look at this European trade? Isn't this one European trade we could do without?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for raising that point, and I was going to comment on it in my contribution later on, because the Minister on the front bench very kindly afforded a meeting to myself and other colleagues and animal welfare groups to discuss this very issue, and we were pressing him on the matter. He's clearly concerned about it. The officials were very much on the case. I am asking him in my speech if he could give us an update, because DEFRA clearly do recognise that there is an issue and had been working on it and had been making progress, and I'm looking for some reassurance later from the Minister to the House that this will continue. So it very much is an issue. Just to briefly comment on one or two of the points that I mentioned, Madam Deputy Speaker. The ban on pet shop sales, the argument was strongly made by my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent South, and these points I would like the Minister to respond to. I'm sure they're in his remarks already in response to other colleagues or in terms of his own remarks. I would like to ask the Minister if he could comment on enforcement by local authorities. The Honourable Lady not in her place from South Staffordshire said her local authority is very good. It'd be interesting to hear from the Minister if that's consistent across the piece, because it seems to be suggested that some local authorities are better than others, and what DEFRA and DCLG might do to make that more consistent. And also in terms of the clarity of the information supplied to breeders by local authorities and whether that can be improved. The briefings I received made reference several times to the draft Welsh regulations on breeding. I'd be interested to hear if DEFRA see these as being helpful, whether they intend to replicate them or whether they're going to wait to see if they're passed in Wales, and what comments the Minister might have on that. Microchipping, the point has been made about how helpful that will be when it comes through, and the concern about the database has been registered. And I wonder if the Minister would respond on the questions of unscrupulous and even illegal advertising of puppies and kittens. DEFRA, I understand, supported the voluntary scheme from the Pet Advertising Advisory Group, and whether DEFRA intends to go forward further and make that a regulatory requirement rather than a voluntary arrangement. The final point I was going to make in this little section was about the illegal imports and the efforts of DEFRA and the Home Office in that regard. In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I just want to mention the EFRA Select Committee report. The Chairman, I'm very happy to give way to another West Ham United supporter.
I'm delighted to have three in one debate, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I reinforce his point about the importance of illegal imports? Because I have found that both with constituents myself and indeed with a member of my family who rescued a dog which had been the subject of illegal imports, that this is a real issue, a real problem, and a concern that even well-intentioned local authorities, when enforcing, cannot cope with that particular abuse, and we need to tackle that at a national level.
The Honourable Gentleman makes the point very well, and that's why I hope the Minister may give comment on that in his closing remarks. Colleagues scoff about the number of West Ham United supporters who are in the chamber today. The Honourable Lady from South Staffordshire is also a West Ham supporter, as is the Honourable Gentleman from West Ham. We're only missing the Right Honourable Member for Holborn and St Pancras, or we would all be here this morning, or this afternoon. As I was concluding, Madam Deputy Speaker, I wanted to mention, I may come back in 2 seconds if I may, I just want to get this point in. I wanted to mention the EFRA Select Committee report raised by the Honourable Lady who is our Chair. In the report published in February 2013, in recommendations 19, 20 and 21, it covered again the question of the number of litters, the question of enforcement, the question of the internet and the question of illegal adverts. So these matters continue to be raised. I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman briefly.
It's grateful to the Honourable Gentleman in giving way to a fantastic Gillingham football supporter here. Does the Honourable Gentleman agree with me that concern raised by the Kennel Club in regards to Kent, where it says that 18% of individuals have bought a pet either from the internet or from an unscrupulous pet shop. So on that basis, does he agree with me that there needs to be more work being done in relation to the internet angle to tackle this unscrupulous aspect?
The Honourable Gentleman makes a very valid point, and again I do hope the Minister comes back to the question of the internet and indeed the voluntary agreement led by the Pet Advisory Scheme that I mentioned in my remarks earlier on. It does allow me also to mention that I have over the years got 2 dogs from Battersea Dogs and Cats Home. One came second in the Westminster Dog of the Year competition and one came first in the Westminster Dog of the Year competition. And hopefully this debate today will raise the profile that those who are looking for animals, there are very good rescue organisations right across the country who would be delighted to hear from our constituents and look after dogs for whatever reason have had to be abandoned or have not been looked after from the start. This is an issue of great concern to the animal-loving public, Madam Deputy Speaker, as evidenced by the number of colleagues here and the interest shown from outside, and I look forward to the response from my honourable friend, the Shadow Minister, when she makes her remarks later on, as well as the Minister in due course.
Gentleman with the Dogs Trust tie, Mr. Simon Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've been a long-term supporter of Pup Aid, and I wish to pay tribute to the work that has been carried out by Mark Abraham and many others outside this place in bringing the issue of puppy farms to the attention of the House. I should also declare that I'm both a dog and a cat lover. I have a large German pointer, a certain doggy style with 2 chihuahuas, and a ginger cat called Mango. Madam Deputy Speaker, can we imagine what it is like to be a pup born in a filthy and unsanitary puppy farm? Can we imagine being separated too early from mums and brothers and sisters, to travel to a pet shop hundreds of miles away, sold en masse and treated as a commodity with little regard to animal welfare? Can we imagine what it is like to be 4 times more likely to be affected by canine parvovirus?
Would the honourable gentleman give way?
I will.
I thank the honourable gentleman. As we're imagining what it's like in those conditions, can you imagine a human child being separated from its mother at 6 weeks?
My honourable friend draws a good parallel. It's important to note that cats and dogs have no voice, and here today perhaps we can give them a voice on their behalf. Dogs and cats are loving creatures. They need parents, they need their siblings to interact with. The canine parvovirus is a disease that attacks the puppy's nervous system. It causes vomiting and diarrhea and can cost thousands and thousands of pounds to treat. I think all of us here today can imagine what these terrible things are like, and I think hundreds of thousands of people up and down the country clearly can imagine the horrific conditions and the pain that is caused, and that is why we're here today to debate this issue and hopefully move nearer to bringing it to an end. The reasons for the problems are clear, and they've been outlined by other speakers very well, but it seems to me we should listen to Pup Aid, who have said everyone should ask, "Where's Mum?" to insist on a puppy or a kitten and the mother interacting, and to be aware that the absence of the mother was likely to indicate that the puppy had been bred commercially and was being sold on by a third party. It is an important issue and one we should tackle. It is an issue that the majority of animal charities, welfare organisations and veterinary professionals support. There is no justification for selling puppies or kittens in retail outlets. Puppy buyers, often unaware of the issues, need to get wise and to ask where puppy farmers sell their pups, and be aware that corners are often cut. We must urge people, dog lovers, cat lovers, to do their own research before buying, and people should preferably go to a rescue home or a breeder that they know and that they know they can trust. I will.
He's making a very powerful point about the importance of seeing the mother of puppies or kittens when potential buyers go there. Does he agree with me that actually also the age of the puppy or kitten is important too, and that ideally they should be really 8 weeks old before being separated from their mother?
Absolutely, I agree entirely. We've heard earlier that some puppies are separated as young as 4 weeks. Puppies need a chance to grow, to develop into the characters they will be in later life, to learn all they can from their mothers, to interact with their siblings. You know, it is totally unacceptable that they should be separated at that young age. My view, as well as the points made by Pup Aid, as well as the requirement to see the mother, we should make sure that local authorities continue to be extremely thorough in their checks on breeding establishments, and they should not be granting licences where breeding establishments even remotely resemble a puppy farm.
You will have heard an earlier intervention concerning the problems of local authority funding. Does he not think this has to be addressed so there are sufficient public officials to actually examine the way these breeding establishments operate? Because without that, this travesty of justice for the animals will continue.
I take the honourable gentleman's point on board. There are a number of issues. Today, hopefully we send a message out to the public to say, be wise, be careful, look into things before you shop. We send a message out to the government and we say, can we look again at the legislation? It's not good enough for it to lie on the statute book. It has to be used and stop the trade that we see today. And also we see local authorities who have their responsibility as well, and they have to make difficult decisions, but I would argue that this was an important thing for local authorities to check and to keep a grip on. And I'd like for us as a House to send out a clear message today that firstly, we cannot support the sale of puppies and kittens in circumstances where it is not possible for the mother to be with the rest of her litter. Secondly, that we are aware of the particularly serious and life-threatening animal welfare and public health, including financial problems associated with pet shops and retail outlets. Thirdly, we confirm that local authorities are already empowered to amend licensing conditions or to ban outright the sale of puppies and kittens in pet shops if they choose to do so. And fourthly and finally, that we encourage those local authorities to tackle this issue using their existing powers. Such messages today would help animal charities and welfare organisations to put their weight behind a public awareness campaign aimed at better educating owners. Madam Deputy Speaker, it is clear that all of our constituents want the government to act. Let us speak up for the puppies and kittens who have no voice, and let us stop this cruel and unnecessary practice. Let us improve animal welfare and let us educate people thinking before they buy puppies and kittens. And let us, Madam Deputy Speaker, all ask, where's Mum?
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I first begin by congratulating my honourable friend from Stoke-on-Trent South for securing this excellent debate. And can I just say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I'll be the third Welsh member to contribute in this debate from across the party, showing the strong consensus and feeling that there is in Wales. And I'm going to come on to some Welsh measures in a little while that my honourable friend from Poplar and Limehouse referred to. But I wanted to start off by saying that this measure has, in Wales, caused a lot of detailed examination, and I hope that the honourable member, the Minister, will take this forward and look at it. But I wanted to start off by saying, like many others, that I am an animal lover, and I have had dogs from different sources in the past all my life. I first remember, long before the internet, that my father purchased a puppy from a long way away in a cardboard box from the Exchange of Mart. That was the method that many did it. It came on the train and we met it in the station. That dog lived for many, many years and was a healthy dog, and we were very lucky. Most recent ones I had a sheepdog for some 12 years from the RSPCA, and I pay tribute to them for the work that they do in welfare. And I've also recently had a Springer Spaniel from a rescue centre. And I make these points because these do actually a brilliant job, because if people can't look after them, there is a place to take them back to. The welfare and traceability of that dog from the minute it enters those rescue centres is taken care of, and I think that's very, very important as we move forward. There are a minority, and they are a minority, who breed dogs in terrible circumstances, but it's a growing number and it needs to be dealt with, and I want to concentrate on those puppy farms. Far too many of them are in Wales, I have to say, and that is why Wales, I believe, is ahead of the game when it comes to looking at legislation to how to deal with them. My honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, eloquently put the issue about shops and high street sales of it. I want to deal with the puppy farms themselves, because and there is an issue, and a number of honourable gentlemen and honourable members on both sides have raised the issue of how can we resource legislation and local authorities and give them the necessary resources. That's a very difficult one, and we need to look at that sensibly, but we do need to have, I believe, either the Welsh Government alongside the UK Government putting forward legislation. I'll give way to my
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving me. I wasn't sure if he was going to go on to say what stage of these draft Welsh regulations are. Are they out for consultation? Are they coming in? Are they expected? Or are they just being published?
I'll make reference to that, because the honourable gentleman from Carmarthen Dynefo said about the legislation and issues that are already being dealt with. The the draft regulations that I'm referring to are the Animal Welfare Regulations, Breeding of Dogs, Wales Regulations 2014, and that was begun by the previous Environment Minister in Wales, who unfortunately is no longer in position, and we have a new, but they have been published. The consultation has taken place, environmental impacts have taken place, and we need to move forward. In the short time that I have, I'll just outline some of those measures because I think it would be useful. And I want to see, and I'm sure every member in this House would want to see, all parts of the United Kingdom having the proper regulations in place and having the proper resources, because I don't want puppy sales or kitten sales close to the border having different regulations. I think we need to have a UK-wide approach, although I respect that these issues are devolved to different administrations in the United Kingdom. The government's proposals that I'm referring to, the regulations, actually talk about dog breeders would have to have a licence. Local authorities would regulate those licences, and this is the issue, I know, with resources. This replaces the Section 1 of the Breeding of Dog Acts 1973 within Wales, and I hope, as I say, this could be taken across the United Kingdom. If a breeder was found not to have the required licence, then there could be a custodial sentence. And again, it's the deterrent as much as the actual regulations, making sure the regulations are in place. Dog breeders are defined of those that have a minimum of 3 breeding bitches on their premises. 3 or 4 litters a year are bred over 12 months only, and that all adverts of the puppies for sale are done properly. These are the type of regulations that would open up transparency so that people could know what they were purchasing. To get a licence, the premises must be inspected by the local authority, and again the resources are needed to this, but it would ensure that the high standards are there from the beginning. We in this House talk about a lot of issues, and animal welfare is very important, and I'm very proud of the fact that we brought in the Welfare Act 2006, but it doesn't go far enough. And I think today we do have an opportunity, the whole of this House of Commons coming together by having this debate and listening to what people really care about out there, as well as the other issues, or the welfare issues, and acting upon them. And I've been very proud of many of the debates that we've had over the last 3 or 4 years in these backbench committees. But it is important that the government listens to what the members are relaying on behalf of their constituents. And in this debate, we've had an excellent debate raising those issues. We want to find solution to stop the dog breeding in the way that it has been done, the unethical nature of that, because we all care about the animals we've got. And one final remark, Madam Deputy Speaker, there are a number of TV programmes now that actually help and raise awareness, and that's an important thing because the British public do care, and we, as this British Parliament, must relay those views. We have done sufficiently today, and I hope the Minister will take on board those issues and also look at the Welsh measures that I referred to. Very good.
Paul Burstone.
Much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to start by echoing the remarks of the Honourable Gentleman who just sat down. This has been a very good debate so far. It has highlighted something that so many of our constituents feel so strongly about, and certainly, like other honourable members, I have been overwhelmed by the numbers of my constituents who were determined to make sure I was here for this debate, and I know other honourable members have felt the same and have demonstrated in their presence and their contributions today. I want to thank the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent South for his opening remarks, for securing this debate, and the Backbench Business Committee. Like other honourable members, I am a pet owner. I have a fantastic dog called Indy, who is a Labrador Collie cross. He has the brains of a collie and the appetite of a Labrador. That's a very fatal combination, I'm sure honourable members will know. He is also currently courting votes because he's standing in the election that the Kennel Club is running for Parliamentary Dog of the Year, and that's the only canvassing I will do on his behalf during this debate. This debate is really important because it is about giving the government an opportunity to set out what it is already doing and for it to respond to the calls that are being made by honourable members on behalf of constituents to do more. And there are more things that can be done within the purview of existing legislation and regulation to make a difference to the lives of puppies and kittens and the way in which they are treated, and also to ensure the public are better informed and make better judgments when it comes to buying a dog or pet, to ensure themselves that those animals are being raised to the highest welfare standards. If we were having a discussion about farm animals, we would expect and not tolerate the sort of things that puppies and kittens often have to put up with as a consequence of the gaps in our current regulations. Now, it does seem to me that there really can be no justification today for retailing of pets and kittens through pet shops. I've had in my own constituency over the years many of my constituents who have felt aggrieved that there have not been sufficient powers to deal with this issue of inappropriate sales of such in such shops, and indeed the way in which this does provide a channel for disreputable dealers to enable their product, as it were, to be sold. And I call it a product because that's how they see it. It is the commodification of something that the public loves so much. So surely this does need to be addressed through the licensing system. And I hope the Minister can say what government is minded to do to ensure local authorities are aware of just what latitude they have when setting licence conditions for pet shops. And other honourable members have been right to highlight that. And I'm sure government, along with the Local Government Association, could do much more in that respect. And it's also, I think, a concern that these dealers do remain, and breeders do remain, in the shadows, unchecked and unregulated, when they are using shops as the way to retail their pets. Now, as well as pet shops, honourable members have already talked about this. I would describe the Wild West nature of the internet being used by unscrupulous breeders and dealers to prey, frankly, on the public's love of cats and dogs, and to peddle sick and poorly treated puppies and kittens. Now, I hope the Minister can tell us what further steps he intends to take to collaborate with the body that has responsibility for the voluntary arrangements around advertising in this area, to satisfy himself and honourable members and our constituents that that code of practice is being followed, and if it isn't being followed, what further steps could be taken to ensure that that is being properly addressed. Now, the other thing is the government should be praised for its determination to introduce chipping, and for this to be a compulsory arrangement going forward. But it will only be useful if it does provide for proper traceability in the long run, and I hope that the Minister can tell us something more about that. I would indeed.
Is an important point he makes about the chipping, and of course the more dogs that are chipped, the more veterinary surgeons do it, and people go there, he said, the cheaper it'll be, because there is an issue of cost for some people, and the economies of scale, and the traceability is very important, and of course with licensed puppy farms and that, then you'll be able to trace it right back to the source.
That's absolutely right, and that's why I hope when the Minister does come to respond to this debate, he'll be able to tell us more about how that scheme's rollout will go forward, and indeed those economies of scale, how they can actually make this a blessing for owners, but also a way of properly policing the way in which unscrupulous breeders go about what they are doing. And my final comment really is just to, again, endorse the strong comments that have been made by honourable members on all sides of the House about the value of actually making the choice instead to adopt a rescue dog. I think this is absolutely right. My dog Indy is a rehome dog, and was quite a handful when he arrived with us. He's a reformed character now, but nonetheless still does go for the occasional bit of picnic snaffling in the park. But I think it is worth saying that there are some fantastic charities who make that possible. We need to make sure that they are better known and that the public choose to support them more often. So I hope that the government will weigh carefully the representations that have been made by honourable members on all sides of this House today. I don't think the status quo really is acceptable. It's certainly not acceptable to many of my constituents when it comes to the welfare of pets, and it's essential that the government takes this opportunity to set out its determination to ensure the very highest standards of welfare and protection for pets, and particularly for puppies and kittens.
John MacDonald.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my honourable friend for securing the debate. I'd like to thank the 125,000 people who signed the petition. If nothing else, it's enabled MPs to get up and demonstrate how many dogs, cats, goldfish they own, and also to name them and put them on the historic record. So it's been some valuable contribution to our civilization. Early in 2009, there was an exposure of a network of puppy farms in Wales, which was horrendous and showed the barbaric treatment of animals. And I tabled an early day motion at that time, and 75 honourable members signed the EDM, and it called for a review of the legislation to ensure that the legislation we had in place was effective. At that point in time, and since then, we were given various assurances that the 99 and the 2006 Acts were appropriate. And I'm grateful for the work that's been done by the Select Committee and by the various campaigning organisations to demonstrate actually this legislation, though it lays the foundations, and I welcome the 2006 Act, I thought it was quite comprehensive, though it laid the foundations, there's a lot more detail that needs to be done. And a number of the issues that have been raised today, I fully support. I think in terms of the breeding licensing, reducing the regime to 2 litters a year is absolutely critical now. Beyond that, it becomes an industry, and at that point in time, I think that's where the abuses occur. Importation, I think, is critical. And the threshold of 5 animals per individual is too high. It enables a large number of animals to be introduced into the country, literally and almost subverting the legislation as it now stands. The third issue that's been raised today, I take a fairly strong line on this. In terms of the separation of the puppy from the mother, literally, and we're seeing it weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks' time, I don't accept the 8-week. I would rather 12-week. I want a harder regime. I want it encompassed in legislation so it is clear-cut that it takes place. But let me just say this. Too often in this House, we will the objectives, but we don't will the means to achieve those objectives. The point has been raised on a number of occasions now that local authorities do not have the resources invested in this to enable them to undertake the enforcement regime that we expect. And I think it would be wrong of us today simply to castigate those local authorities, because in many areas they're struggling with the resources that they have to protect children, to protect elderly people. They are stretched in terms of the resources. So I think it behoves us now to actually review in detail the resources available to those individual local authorities. One of the honourable members raised the issue about ensuring best practice is inculcated right the way across local authority, and I agree with that. But best practice still relies upon having those expert professionals being able to go out, undertake the inspections, work with the RSPCA and the voluntary sector, advise owners as well. To be honest, some of this is about advising those who are involved in this industry and how they bring their standards up, but at the end of the day, ensuring that there's enforcement. And I get the understanding from talking to other members and talking to our own local authorities in my own area and elsewhere, actually those resources are not available. So I'd welcome the Minister really to bring local authorities in, to engage in the dialogue, maybe survey them about what resources are being devoted to this issue already, what strengthening of resources is needed, and then to bring that report back to the House so that we have properly undertaken our role, which is setting objectives, making sure there's a systematic process in place, but making sure as well that we devote the resources to tackling this particular problem. And in that way, I think we can manage a way forward. If we can't do that, all the pious words that we've said today and the eloquent speeches will be irrelevant, and we'll be back here in another 4 or 5 years with more scandals taking place, an excellent legislative regime in place, but not being implemented at the grassroots level where the resources of the implementation is absolutely vital.
Justin Tomlinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's an absolute pleasure to follow such a powerful speech drawing on a long track record on this very important issue. And I pay, along with others, tribute to the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent for bringing forward such an incredibly important campaign that has united the Chamber. This has been one of the most positive and constructive debates that I as a member have taken part in, and I'm delighted that the campaign was highlighted in the Swindon Advertiser, and my Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent did feature. And but actually we've all been contacted through social media by great numbers, and an interesting fact that I had is that on my own Facebook page this article
on this campaign attracted over 60,000 views and 534 shares. That is 10 times more than anything I have previously done before, which is probably no surprise with 13 million households having pets. It's something that is a very important issue, and in the spirit of naming pets, I'm delighted to say that my wife very much champions rescuing dogs. I almost have to put my own limit in place, but Susie, our 11-year-old rescue dog from the Golden Oldies website, has recently just come second in the Lydiard Park Best Rescue Dog competition. International fame for her. And this is a very serious issue. Puppy farming, the mass commercial production of puppies purely for profit and without care for the welfare or happiness of the pup. Aside from... With pleasure.
Thank you, and I'm very grateful for him giving way. On the issue of the people who run these things, I sometimes don't think that we understand who they are. In my constituency, I have at least one puppy farm. The people who run it are linked to organised crime. So whether it's exploitation of people or animals or drugs or crash for cash, these people are willing to exploit anything, including the most vulnerable animals.
I thank the Honourable Lady for that very important intervention, because as evidence has shown, 95% of people wouldn't wish to buy from puppy farmers, but over 900,000 a year inadvertently do so. It's the hidden crime. Now, aside from the obvious... With pleasure.
We've had many vital speeches on the issue of puppy farming, but as the motion says, I hope that it can also be acknowledged that this equally affects kittens. And as a cat owner all my life, my current cat is called Naughty Cat, to contribute to the cat naming. I hope that we can also ask that regulations are reviewed for the way in which they impact kittens, and also that owners are suitably aware of the issue when they seek to buy new cats.
I thank my honourable friend for that important intervention. My cats, Monty and Maggie, have just cheered at that brilliant intervention, and they are very proud that they came from properly licensed breeders. Now, aside from the obvious concerns of animal cruelty, horrific breeding conditions, malnourishment, lack of socialisation, lack of immunisation and deworming, contracting infectious diseases and being separated from their mothers too early, people unknowingly support puppy farming by purchasing pups from unlicensed breeders, which is both fueling the puppy farming industry and putting themselves at risk of spending thousands of pounds on a puppy that is doomed to die soon after reaching his or her home. Now, we know that 1 in 3 of purchased pets come through pet shops, online, particularly sites like Gumtree, which were very slow to react to improving their standards, or via newspaper adverts. Now, it's a real credit to the Pup Aid campaign set up by Mark Abraham, the Mark the Vet from television, the celebrity that he is, with great support from the Kennel Club, Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, Blue Cross, Cats Protection, Dogs Rescue Protection and the RSPCA. We've got all of the heavyweights from the animal welfare world supporting this incredibly important campaign. And in summary, what we're looking today to see is that there should be mandatory regulation and licensing for all dog breeders in the UK, rather than just those who breed 4 or more litters a year. We should ban pet shops from selling puppies. The majority of pet shops puppies are from farms. There is no reason for this to be allowed to continue. There should be stricter adherence to breeding of dogs, of the Breeding of Dogs Act 1973. This act demands that no person may keep a breeding establishment for dogs unless owning a licence granted by the proper authority. Granting of a licence entails inspections of breeding practices and premises by a veterinary surgeon or veterinary practitioner and officer of the authority, giving consumers that confidence rather than that is supported by 95% of the British public, and also make sure that the enforcement is consistent, it's good and happens everywhere, because all too often it is patchy at best in this country. And there needs to be a stricter adherence to the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, which Pup Aid believes requires secondary legislation. I'm not somebody who would normally call for regulation, but on something of such importance and with great support from the public, I think this is one of those times that we can push for this. And this would repeal any outdated legislation and could be introduced to prohibit the licensing of pet shops or retail outlets to sell puppies or kittens where the mother is not present. Now, regulation alone is inadequate. We need to also make sure those enforcement officers are well trained and are supported, so there's more frequent and tighter inspections into the breeders. Again, giving consumers the confidence that they know they are getting what they believe they do. So, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to end what frankly is a free-for-all of mass breeding of puppies and kittens, simply prioritising profit over welfare. The public want action, and I and members from right across the chamber fully support that.
Geoffrey Robinson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very pleased to be taking part in this debate, and as other members have done, first of all, like to indeed congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South. He and his colleagues who have supported him so well in this have taken us into a most important debate that quite clearly strikes a chord right throughout the country. I think the people signing the e-petition, now, if I heard my honourable friend from Hayes and Harlington correctly, is now 125,000. And I'm very pleased to say that the names of my own family are proudly inscribed on that. We are a house of dog lovers. We can boast 3 Great Danes and disgracefully overfed Labrador, which may not, or fat Labrador, that may not be uncommon in other members' households too. And my wife has gone to the trouble of rescuing 3 donkeys, which are now 5, from various distress situations in Britain and Europe. Their only function in life seems to make sure that we keep a very organic gardening process well underway at home. But there are many humorous stories we can all tell about our own experiences with pets and in our own families, but deep in the psyche of the British people is a love of animals, and we do well to respect that, and more importantly to respond to that in any way we can. Amongst those 125,000 now, preeminent has been Mark Abraham. I think we could all agree on that, and his Pup Aid programme has hit, I'm sure, the consciences and come to the attention of many throughout our constituencies. One in particular in my constituency is Joy Yates, who has written to me unremittingly on this topic and made sure that I was here today to contribute. And I'd just like to read a short excerpt, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, very conscious of the time, that she sent to me most recently. She said, "Geoffrey, puppies need more than a cage, food and drink, as their emotional needs cannot be possibly met in this crucial period of development." I'm sure we'd all utterly agree to that. I will give way. Just let me finish this paragraph, and I willingly give way to the honourable member. For that reason, Pup Aid is seeking a ban on the sale of puppies in pet shops where the mother is not present. I give way to the honourable member. Right honourable member.
It's like him to know that there are many people in Wokingham who entirely echo his sentiments and those of his constituents, and she's put it extremely well.
Thank him very much for that intervention, Madam Deputy Speaker. Very welcome, particularly coming from such a distinguished intellectual quarter of the Conservative Party. It was up to his usual high intellectual standards. And she then urges that I attend here and debate. And I'm very pleased to be here and very pleased to add something which I may say comes from the point of view of those who wish to see practical steps taken. I noticed that he's not present at the moment. My honourable friend for Poplar was very foremost in saying we have a huge strength of organisations in support of us here. We have a string of legislative attempts to tackle different aspects of the problem, and that's all been done with the best of intentions. And we saw that really, those who took part in it, and I'm very pleased to say I had a role in that, with the Dangerous Dogs Act. And it isn't easy to legislate in this area, and I caution against early, certainly primary legislation. I know my honourable friend entirely was speaking for the opposition today, although there's no party divide on this, we're united, but speaking from our front bench on this later in the debate, agrees on that entirely. But I'm sure there is a lot we could do, again, looking at that, those series of legislations, the series of guidances given, and the responsibilities as they're defined now in local government, to sort out a plethora of different and sometimes not wholly complementary sets of guidances and regulations that can be brought together and simplified and made sure that we know who is responsible in each case for pursuing the particular aspect of the problem. And in that respect, I don't expect the Minister to be able to say much about it. And I noticed my honourable friend from Stoke, South, who was insistent not to get detracted by it, but I think we're going to have to face the fact that if we can succeed in bringing breeding under control, I don't say there, our experience there in North Wales and in Clacton has been that they've been very responsible. 12 weeks was the minimum period the puppies stayed with their mother, so they're very, very good breeders. But coming back to my honourable friend's point, he didn't want to get distracted into the question of the internet, but I do think it's going to become the problem. If we manage to do all that we're setting out to do here, you've still got the internet, and that will become ever more attractive as the other sources of puppies and the rest of it. If the thing is, hopefully it won't be, but if it is as viral in the sense that it's attracting so much attention and so much demand, you're going to have to find ways of dealing with the internet, and that may mean some mandatory restrictions on websites. I don't know, but I leave that with the Minister and leave with him the other problems. But we do look forward to hearing a coherent, clear-cut set of proposals that are being worked on, or he can tell us about today, that will deal with the problem in a practical, sensible, and with minimum additional fuss and bother in terms of paperwork from the government. I'm very pleased for taking part, and thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Sir Edward Lee.
Obviously, this is a very emotive and emotional debate, especially for those of us who have welcomed dogs and cats into our homes and included them almost as members of our family. I'm not going to talk about my own dog because it would be too emotional. And sadly, he's just passed away. But the Right Honourable friend, the member, but I will talk about the Right Honourable former member for Birmingham Sparkbrook, Lord Hattersley. And of course, he's written very eloquently of his love for his departed dog, Buster. And we all have similar stories to tell. It seems to me that dogs have so many of the virtues that us politicians lack, particularly silence and loyalty. However, our sympathy for these animals reflects, I think, on the comfort and the companionship they provide, particularly for elderly people in our increasingly atomised society. And therefore, I think everybody who's spoken believes that we do have a duty of care for these creatures. And it's no surprise that so many of our constituents have written to us, and they feel quite rightly very strongly about the cruelties which puppies and kittens are being forced to undergo in these puppy farms, particularly being separated far too early from their mothers. But I think also, and this is the point I really want to make in this debate, that there is an extraordinarily wide degree of legislation which is available to local authorities and to ministers already. And I think we should be very proud of the legacy of this legislation going back well over 100 years in our country. The Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was founded in 1824 by a group of zealous reformers. It included such illustrious members of this House as William Wilberforce and Richard Martin, both incidentally good high Tories. In its first year, the Society managed to bring over 60 offences to the courts, and it was awarded royal patronage by Queen Victoria in 1840. And we all know the vital work of the RSPCA. It doesn't need to be underlined, but there is so much legislation already on the statute book. Just to name a few: the Pet Animals Act 1951, the Breeding of Dogs Act 1973, the Breedings of Dogs Act 1991, the Breeding and Sale of Dogs Welfare Act 1999. Now, no one can deny the inhumane conditions that exist in puppy farms, and they've been well listed today. And nobody can deny that more should be done to eliminate them from existence. Now, through their licensing of pet sellers, local authorities already have all the powers they need to inspect, and when they are not satisfied that suitable welfare conditions exist, to refuse operating licenses. Now, sadly, yes, of course.
Most grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. And listen to the thrust of my honourable friend's speech. Would he not agree with me that what is actually needed when he names those different parts of legislation is a tidying up of the legislation and having specific legislation which can be implemented efficiently and effectively?
Yeah, that's a fair point. It leads directly really to the very last point I need to make, that I think all too often in this place, when we see abuses continuing, we fly to the temptation to create new legislation. And what we need to do is enforce existing legislation better, ensure that it's modernised and updated, because it is there. And, of course.
Just on that point, he makes a powerful point about the legislation being there. Does he also agree that actually consumer behaviour is key to all of this? So, for example, parents who go with young children to look at puppies will often find themselves in a very difficult place emotionally if they decide not to take the puppy that their children like, even if it's unsuitable, too young, there is no mother there, and all the rest of it. Does he agree that consumer behaviour is part of the thing we need to change?
Yeah, that is absolutely right. And I think we've got to resist the temptation. May I just say very gently to my honourable friend for Swindon that, you know, I'm not sure it would actually be very wise simply to stop through legislation at this pace pet shops selling puppies. It may be just too heavy-handed, and we've got to be very careful that we don't, because of our concern and emotion about these subjects, that we don't bring in more legislation which may be unenforceable. After all, we've got to remember that enormous numbers of puppies are brought in from without the jurisdiction, where we have very little control. So the point I make to my honourable friend for Gloucester, and I think his point is an important one, first of all, we need to enforce legislation that we already have, and local authorities have the power. Secondly, we need to proclaim this message that the secret of this, and all the organisations, charities involved in this say, and this is where they agree with my honourable friend, that the key to this is to inform the consumer. Yes, it's a consumer that must make the informed choice, as we did, to go and see the dog breeder, see the puppy with the mother. Don't buy the puppy in some halfway location. Don't go to a pet shop. Do your research. Work out that you've got the resources to look after what is a living creature. And I think if we can put that message from this debate, rather than calling for more and more legislation. Oh, well, if the Honourable Lady wishes to intervene very quickly, I'll give way.
Would my right honourable friend like to explain how he would expect consumers to divine hidden illnesses amongst young puppies and kittens which they are trying to buy?
Well, I think that's a fair point, but I would have thought that if we can send out the message that if you go to a responsible dog breeder, rather than buy a puppy or a kitten off the internet, if you go to a dog breeder, you are far more likely to acquire a dog which will not have behavioural problems in the future and will have been raised in a healthy and proper way with its mother. So my concluding remark is that we need to explore how to better enforce existing legislations rather than add to the already deep panoply of laws and regulations. And we are, as I just say, committed as a government not to increasing regulations unless they are absolutely necessary. The government, however, should look at how it can better help local authorities to work against puppy farms. And we've got to ensure, working together on both sides of the House, that we create safe and humane conditions for animals throughout the United Kingdom.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak in this debate and would want to offer my congratulations to the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South for his persistent campaigning for stronger regulation of the sale of puppies and kittens. As many other honourable members have said, puppy farming is a horrendous business where dogs are kept for the whole of their lives, often in small, dark, often filthy kennels, and used essentially as breeding machines. They have no chance to express their normal behaviours, and many suffer from untreated illnesses. They really are, in a sense, factory farms for dogs. And so I do think we need to grasp this opportunity to put an end to the barbaric practice of puppy and kitten farming once and for all. And we know that there are some key measures that we could decide to take today that would make significant steps towards achieving that. And that's why I want to add my voice to the very many others who are asking the government to take what steps they can today. I want to add my strong support for the measures set out in this motion, but I also first want to pay my own tribute to someone who a number of honourable members have mentioned, someone who has been a real driving force behind this campaign, and that's the PupAid founder and Brighton-based vet Mark Abraham. His contribution to ending puppy farming and animal welfare more generally is hugely impressive, and he's helped to assemble a formidable coalition that we've already heard a lot, but a coalition including the Blue Cross, the Dog Rescue Foundation, Dogs Advisory Council, Dogs Trust, the Kennel Club and the RSPCA. Add to that, as we know, around 125,000, I think people said, well, there's the latest figure of the number of people who have signed that petition. I think it's clear the strength of feeling across the country that we should be doing more to act in this area. As a rescue dog owner myself and someone who got that rescue dog from a very wonderful RSPCA centre in Brighton, I want to add my voice to those of the very many Brighton residents who've taken the time to write and often to share their photographs too, to share their concerns about puppy farming. I wanted to mention a vet that I've been speaking to, because what concerned me about that was that she was saying that in her experience this is a problem that is actually becoming significantly worse. And in her view, it won't change without some kind of intervention or regulation. She's... Yes, I will.
Already the concern about puppy farming, but it's in terms of tackling it, yes, one way in terms of banning puppy sales, but is that not just the tip of the iceberg? And we need to go to the supply issue, and at the core is a supply of transportation from other jurisdictions. Should we not really look at the enforcement and the proper enforcement about cruel transportation of puppies?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I certainly agree that we do need to do that. What my concern is slightly that, from some honourable members at least, we're being asked to look at other issues, which we certainly should, but that shouldn't be at the expense of doing what we can do here today. So I would completely take on board things that I think, for example, the Right Honourable Member for Gainsborough was saying about you know, the way in which animals come from other jurisdictions or they're coming via the internet, and maybe that's a harder nut to crack right now. But that doesn't mean and shouldn't mean that we don't act now to take action when it comes to the pet shops, to the garden centres and so on. So I do agree that this is not going to be a panacea, it's not going to be a silver bullet, but it is something that we could do relatively straightforwardly, and I think we should do it because we can do it and it would make a difference. I was speaking, Madam Deputy Speaker, about the vet who'd raised in particular her concerns about pedigree puppy farming, which can result in particularly grim conditions. Genetic problems range from serious breathing difficulties to chronic lifelong skin allergies to crippling joint problems. And the real concern, I think, is that some of these problems, for example, around obstructive airway syndrome, are actually seen as normal by those who are willing to put looks and fashion before animal welfare. A price tag of over £1,000 is not uncommon for breeds like pugs and bulldogs, and the inevitable outcome is more breeding to meet more demand. In some breeds of bulldogs, she was explaining to me that the majority of bitches cannot give birth naturally and they need a caesarean to deliver puppies. And they were explaining that they've come across breeders who are so willing to put their dogs under repeat surgeries so that they can keep breeding them for as long as it's profitable and literally breed these dogs to death. Now, of course, some of the responsibility should stop with the consumers who are willing to pay to purchase dogs from puppy farms and bad breeders. And that's why I welcome the fact that the motion does talk about the importance of raising awareness. But I do think that many people simply are not aware of this issue. They don't know that if they're buying a puppy from a pet shop, that it could have come from the kind of grim background that we're describing today. So yes, raising awareness is massively important. The role of local authorities is massively important, and I would underline again the importance of making sure that local authorities are properly resourced to do the kind of welfare checks that they have the right to do. But all of that doesn't take away from the fact that the government needs to act as well. And that's why I think the vet that I've been referring to again says that she doesn't believe that the problem will go away anytime soon without some kind of intervention or regulation. And so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will just simply conclude by saying that I think there is a case for overwhelming action today. The fact that we can't do everything doesn't mean that we shouldn't do anything. And so I hope very much that the government will listen to the strength of feeling right across the House and the strength of feeling right across the country and take the measures that are within his power to do very, very swiftly.
Andrew Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll keep my remarks brief. I'm very concerned that a number of people no longer think that owning a dog or indeed any pet is a serious long-term commitment. That is shown by one statistic on dog ownership in the UK. According to the RSPCA, 1/5 of those who bought a puppy in the last 2 years now no longer own that dog. The definition of a commodity is a marketable item produced to satisfy consumer wants or needs. But puppy farmers only consider the wants or needs of the consumer. The wants or needs of their marketable item are irrelevant. Mr. Speaker, Britain is known across the world as a nation of pet lovers, but allowing the battery farming of puppies is cruel to the bitches involved and to their puppies. They are too frequently taken away from their litters far too early, unsocialised, traumatised, and with health and temperament problems. And with such a poor start in life, there is little wonder that they do not always settle easily into the families that buy them with such great hopes. By allowing puppies who should become much more loved family members to be traded as a commodity is not only the dogs that lose out. The people have also lost money, but many will also have lost their faith in dogs. And it is the RSPCA, the Dogs Trust, and smaller dog rescue charities such as Friends of the Animals and Bracken Dog Rescue on the Isle of Wight that pick up the pieces. All of those excellent charities know only too well that puppy farms add to the problems. There are too many dogs, many of whom are still young, who need good, loving homes, and they are harder and harder to find. So we should look carefully at reducing the number of litters. Many people think that 2 a year is the appropriate maximum, the appropriate number to have licences, rather than 5. Local authorities should prosecute every time they find it bad practice in licensed breeding premises. Sentencing guidelines should make clear that practices typically associated with puppy farming are a serious criminal offence, and someone convicted of any cruelty or poor dog breeding should be barred from holding a licence or working in any dog breeding establishment. Only then will we be able to properly tackle the cruel practices and the horrible repercussions of puppy farming.
David Ames.
As a member of the Backbench Business Committee, I'm very pleased that we have debated this subject this afternoon, and I congratulate the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South on his speech, and I agreed with every word. Now, in this country, we have a wonderful record in animal welfare, in contrast to a number of other countries. And I say to my honourable friend, the Minister, if he responds in a positive fashion to what he's listened to this afternoon and the huge number of representations made from constituents throughout the country, then I think our stock will grow further. Because I should tell the Minister that before this debate, behind the scenes, I had tried to do something on this issue. And I had a meeting with the splendid noble Lord de Morley. He listened very carefully to everything I had to say, and at the end of the meeting, I think he suggested that I wrote a letter. Now, I'm saying to my honourable friend the Minister in a very kind way, I want him to be brave this afternoon. I want him to tear up the speech that has been drafted for him by the civil servants. And unlike my colleagues who feel that we don't need legislation, but actually respond in a positive fashion to what he's heard this afternoon. Because we all know that civil servants on occasions will say no, Minister. Now, I had the privilege of serving on the Scientific Procedures Bill that became an Act in 1986. And this was a piece of legislation that amended the 1911 Animal Act. It was groundbreaking at the time. It dealt with a huge range of cruelty that was meted out to animals in this country. And since that time, there have been many other attempts. And I, in my rather ham-fisted way, have tried to promote, for instance, in 1989, the Dogs Bill, 1990, the Pets Animal Amendment Bill. So I can tell my colleagues that although I agree as Conservatives we are against legislation, we really do need to do a tidying up exercise here. Now, I want, Madam Deputy Speaker, to praise Clarissa Baldwin of the Dogs Trust, Rosemary Smart of the Kennel Club, the wonderful vet Mark Abrams, and my right honourable friend, the member for Rutland and Melton. Now, all these people are judges in the Westminster Dog of the Year show, and I will be entering yet again my 2 rescued pugs, Botox and Lily. And I have to tell the House they are somewhat depressed year after year parading before the judges and getting absolutely nowhere. And I should tell the House that I have now got them into an arranged marriage, so I think the very least that they could be awarded, Madam Deputy Speaker, would be the best married dogs in the show. I should also tell the House that I'm not mentioning kittens because I'm leaving that to my very good friend Anne Widdicombe. But I do congratulate all the organisations who've worked so hard on this issue. The provisions under the Breeding and Sale of Dogs Act 1999 are certainly inadequate. The wording of the Act is confusing and leaves too much space for individual interpretation. Producing 5 litters every year is absolutely ridiculous, for goodness sake. I think 2 is quite enough. And I think the Minister, hopefully, will respond positively to that. And I agree with... to my honourable friend.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He and I came to the House on the same day, and he will recall, therefore, that since the late Nick Ridley abolished the dog licence, there has been a resistance in successive governments to the establishment of a Swansea for dogs. The fact of the matter is, and the Minister needs to understand this, that unless and until every animal sold is properly registered, properly vaccinated, properly documented, and there are proper controls over the breeding and sale of not just dogs, but cats as well, this problem will not be solved, and the time has come for legislation.
Well, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. We've stood sort of shoulder to shoulder for over 30 years together with my other honourable friend who spoke earlier, and I do hope the Minister will respond, forget his brief, but respond positively to all the remarks that have been made this afternoon.
Most grateful to my honourable friend, and my honourable friend, when pressing the Minister, just bear this in mind, that it's all very well with our honourable friend from Thirsk and Morton saying that an amount of self-regulation can be involved in looking for the mother and etc. But that doesn't take into account the emotional side that people feel when they see a puppy, and therefore stronger legislation and restrictions need to be in place.
I do agree with my honourable friend, although I'm not sure about the remarks which he made earlier this afternoon about the castration of his dog. It is crucial that puppies are exposed to extensive social interaction and stimuli during the first 12 to 14 weeks of their lives. This is more than commercial farmers are willing to provide. As a result, dogs coming from commercial puppy farms are undoubtedly more aggressive, less responsive and less trainable. The current legislation regulating operations of pet shops dates back to 1951. This is a very long time ago, and we certainly do need to change this legislation, particularly as a result of the internet, which has brought so many colleagues into the House this afternoon. The Pet Animals Act 1951 appears to only address the physical requirements that pet shops need to meet. It takes no account of the mental well-being of pets sold or for dogs who need physical exercise. Clear guidance needs to be provided to local authorities. I have also been made aware of the growing problem of illegal dog importation to the United Kingdom. And I would like to take the opportunity that I'm afforded now to urge the Secretary of State to examine how the influx of puppies from rabies-endemic Eastern European countries can be addressed. So I say again to my honourable friend the Minister, be bold, tear up the speech and do something now to stop puppy and kitten farming.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I have great privilege to speak at the end of this debate because I think it's been a very good debate. I think all parties have come together, and I have great pleasure in chairing the All-Party Animal Welfare Group in Parliament here because I believe it is an issue that we all care so strongly about. I first of all want to mention cats, first of all, because there are over 11 million cats in this country. Blue Cross and Cats Protection League are taking in between 4,000 and 5,000 stray cats and kittens a month, so it just shows the scale of problems not only with puppies but with kittens as well. And also young kittens taken away too quickly from their mother, well, not only is it bad for their welfare, it's probably most of those will depart this world because of health reasons. So I think we just have to be absolutely clear about this. I think it is more important than ever to make sure that whatever legislation we've got in place that we can enforce, and I think that's what I think the Minister wants to really talk about this afternoon. I'm sure he will, because it's no good to have legislation that you cannot enforce. And also what we've got to remember is this is not just an animal welfare problem. When you choose a puppy in particular, you are bringing an animal into your household. You may very often have young children, and potentially that puppy can be dangerous and grow into a dangerous dog. If you do not see the mother of that dog, of that puppy, and if you don't actually see the environment in which that puppy has been raised, you do not know the potential of what will happen in your own family with that puppy. And I think we really have to be certain of that. And with the internet, it is becoming more and more easy to access a puppy. And if you go along and buy a puppy and your child picks his puppy up and loves his puppy, it is very difficult for you to say you're not going to buy that puppy. And not only would it be perhaps difficult from a welfare and behaviour point of view, it may be suffering from many diseases because it probably hasn't had the proper inoculations and it hasn't been dealt with properly, whether it's come from a puppy farm that is badly managed or whether it's come from Eastern Europe, because there is another problem which lies, and of course the Honourable Member for Southend West mentioned the fact that you have rabies in these countries. There is also a disease problem as well. We have got to act on all these issues in order that we protect people from buying the wrong type of puppy or kitten. Also, of course, we live in an age, and I'm not against designer dogs, the cockapoo and the labradoodle, but you see, these dogs are very expensive. And so therefore people decide they want this type of dog. They then look on the internet and they actually see a puppy that's probably half the price or a third of the price of what normally, from a good breeder, a cockapoo or a labradoodle would cost. And that is what a lot of the issue. And then people naturally go out, they buy this cheaper puppy, and this has probably come in from Central Eastern Europe, and there lies the real problem. And so I think whatever legislation we've got in place, and I very much welcome what the government has done with bringing in microchipping, but again, you've got to make sure these dogs and puppies are going to be microchipped. If you've got those people who are breeding puppies in their backyards who should not be breeding puppies, then are they going to be the people that are going to have the microchips in those puppies? The answer is no, they are not. And again, I certainly will.
My honourable friend is making such a superb speech that I think we need to hear an extra minute of it. So may I at this point ask him if he's aware of the work of these wonderful charities such as Woofability in the constituency of my honourable friend for Christchurch, which actually train dogs beautifully to do tremendous work for disabled people, such as pulling their socks off, taking the washing out of the washing machine, and doing all sorts of tasks which able-bodied people think nothing of doing, but which are a huge assistance to someone confined to a wheelchair.
My honourable friend makes a very good intervention, because not only is it would help people that are unable to do these jobs for themselves, it also highlights to me how much the dog is a part of the family and part of an individual's life. And many elderly people, the dog becomes their absolute life. And so therefore, if they lose a dog and then they go out and buy the wrong type of puppy that is diseased or has huge behavioural problems, then that becomes a huge social issue as well. So I think it is absolutely imperative that we deal with the situation that's in front of us. And I think the Minister has many parts in his armoury that already, but I think what is not done enough of is actually enforcing what is actually happening in this country. How much are we tracking through ports of Dover or where else that the vans that are coming in with illegal puppies? Are we actually checking on them? Do we actually know what's coming in? Do we actually know that? Are we checking the microchips that are there in the existing dogs? Because if you actually talk to Battersea Dogs Home and Blue Cross, you'll find that if they have puppies and dogs that come in with microchips, only a third of those are accurate as to where they've been linked to. And so therefore there is need not only of making sure that we have the puppies properly microchipped, that we do have the national database and we are able to trace where those dogs have come from, because we can't actually ignore the situation, because I rather fear the situation will get worse, because people have got so used to going onto the internet to buy clothes or shoes or whatever, and unfortunately people then decide they can do the same with buying a puppy. So we've made very strongly in this House from all sides this afternoon the argument that, for goodness sake, when you're buying a puppy, make sure you know where it's come from, you've seen its mother, you've actually seen where it's been bred, you know how the mother behaved, so therefore you're bringing that into your home so that you can have a successful and a loving pet, because that's what the people here in this country believe in, and the vast majority out there actually do a good job. But we've got to make sure the rogues in our society, and they are there, we are actually stamped down on, and stamped down very strongly. Thank you.
Angela Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate today on the very, very important subject of the sale of puppies and kittens, and the related issues around puppy farming and so on. Before I make my contribution, may I pay tribute to the Pup Aid campaign, as indeed I think every contributor to the debate today has done, and especially my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent South, who has led the way in Parliament on this issue, and who has illustrated today very clearly the problems we face in relation to the trade in the breeding and sale of puppies and kittens. I also pay tribute to Mark Abraham, as indeed most people have done today, most colleagues have done today, the TV vet who has been tireless in his campaigning on the issue, and I've worked very closely with him over the last 2 years or so, and can certainly absolutely confirm the great contribution that he's made to this debate. Indeed, it's impossible to be anything other than impressed with his commitment to the cause of animal welfare. Pup Aid has run a very successful campaign with over 100,000 signatures secured for its e-petition, hence, of course, the debate that we are having here today. This alone is testimony, I think, to the success of the campaign and the importance of the issues that it raises, as is, of course, the number of honourable and right honourable members who have contributed to the debate this afternoon. And we have learnt a great deal this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, about colleagues' opinions on this issue, members' opinions, and indeed about their pets as well. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government's record on these issues so far is, if I'm frank, disappointing. But I do hope that the Minister will take the opportunity this afternoon to correct that situation, and indeed do as the Honourable Member for Southend West indicated, and give us some really positive movement on these issues. Puppy farming is widely perceived to be more and more of a problem, while at the same time the importation of puppies has increased massively in recent years. For example, in 2012, the importation of dogs from Hungary increased on the previous year by over 450%, and from Romania by over 1,150%. Coupled with these rises, we are also seeing online sales of puppies and kittens increase significantly, which must be a major concern to anybody who thinks that animal welfare is an important issue. And yet we've seen very little so far from the government by way of a response to this very wide range of issues, including, of course, the sale of puppies and kittens in retail outlets. But it's worse than that, because the government has also failed to get properly to grips with the wider dog welfare issues relating to dog control and responsible ownership. And yes, while measures such as the prosecution of owners whose dogs attack on private property are welcome, and indeed we pressed for them, it has to be said that the government dragged its feet for long enough on all of this and took far too long to get these measures onto the statute book. Mr. Deputy Speaker, if we are to respond effectively to the issues raised today in relation to the breeding and sale of puppies and kittens, then we need to take a comprehensive approach to tackling the problem. This is because the challenges raised by the sale of puppies and kittens in pet shops represents only the tip of the iceberg as far as any concerns about animal welfare standards are concerned. As I have made clear, we believe that we need to look not just at the particular issue raised in the motion under discussion today, but more broadly at breeding practices, the growing trade in online sales and the issues arising out of the misuse of the pet scheme by commercial puppy breeding interests. And we are committed to doing just that, to working with animal welfare organisations and other stakeholders to review the trade in the breeding and sale of puppies and kittens, as indeed my honourable friend, the member for Washington and Sunderland South, indicated earlier. The 2006 Animal Welfare Act, introduced by the last Labour government, sets a useful benchmark for such a review. Labour remains proud of what it achieved with this legislation, which for the first time, and this is a really important point, embedded in statute clear standards relating to the welfare of domestic animals. Yes. The 5 tests set out in the Act are now taken as a practical template for animal welfare assessment, and we will use this legislation as the right starting point for our review. Mr. Speaker, this has been an excellent debate which has given a very necessary airing to the growing problem of the irresponsible breeding and sale of puppies and kittens. Many members today have made excellent contributions to the debate. The member for Poplar and Limehouse talked about the problems relating to the importation of commercially bred dogs under the pet scheme, as indeed did the member for Hayes and Arlington, who also talked about the relationship between the puppy and the mother and the need for the mother to be present at the point of sale. He also, the member for Coventry North West, talked about the emotional needs of puppies, and the member for Annis Morn talked about the measures being taken by the Welsh Assembly, and indeed we look forward to hearing more about that. The member for Sheffield Heeley talked about the trade in breeding and sale and the need for the highest welfare standards. I want to conclude my remarks, however, by paying tribute to the wider animal welfare movement, which has worked again tirelessly to highlight the issues raised today, and indeed in some instances has attempted to establish creative responses to them. The RSPCA, for instance, has campaigned vigorously to draw attention to the abuse of the pet scheme, and has also worked very hard to establish the case for a review of the current status of the standards applying to the breeding and sale of puppies and kittens. The Dogs Trust has led the way with its campaign for compulsory microchipping, and has also played a key role within the Pets Advertising Advisory Group to establish new, higher standards for adverts on websites. May I also take this opportunity to mark on the record the contribution made by Clarissa Baldwin, the outgoing and long-serving, very long-serving Chief Executive of the Trust, for her outstanding contribution to dog welfare. And finally, I pay tribute to the Kennel Club, which 10 years ago developed an assured breeder scheme and which now has 8,000 members. But the case for a comprehensive review of standards in the breeding and sale of puppies and kittens is clear. A review which will have at its heart the welfare of these animals. They deserve nothing less, and as a society which prides itself on our attitudes towards animal welfare, we must not let them down.
Well done. I call the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Mr. George Eustace.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And can I begin by congratulating the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South. I know he's been a very long-standing campaigner on these issues, and I'm sure he'll recall, as the Honourable Member for Thurske and Malden said, that I pursued these issues myself while being a member of the Select Committee. It would also be remiss of me not to mention Mono, my now deceased previous pet dog, who was a rescue dog from the RSPCA, who, like many others, was a wonderfully dedicated friend, albeit with some behavioural issues. I wanted to firstly just say a little bit about some of the areas that the government has made progress on these issues. Firstly, in tackling irresponsible owners. We've increased the penalty for serious dog attacks. We've also enabled it to be an offence for there to be a dog attack on private land. And we've also tightened the law when it comes to dog attacks on guide dogs, and we've introduced compulsory chipping. But I recognise that the theme of the debate today is about something different, which is the welfare of puppies. And I've always been very clear myself that making sure we look after the welfare of puppies, making sure they're properly socialised, as many honourable members have mentioned, is absolutely crucial to the behaviour of those dogs as they grow up and mature. My honourable friend, the member for Southend West, asked me to tear up my script and speak from the heart. I can confirm that I never asked for a script in the first place. I've scribbled some notes of things that members have said, and I want to use the time that I've got to deal with as many points as I can. Firstly, on the issue of pet passports. I can confirm that a new EU regulation is tightening the rules on the EU pet passport scheme. In future, from December this year, it will no longer be possible for a dog under 12 weeks of age to be vaccinated prior to being transported under the pet passport scheme. There is then a 3-week period that the puppy must remain in residence before it can be moved. In practice, that means that from December this year, no puppy or dog will be able to be lawfully transported to this country under the pet passport scheme unless it is at least 15 weeks old. I also wanted to deal with the issue of the internet, which many honourable members have raised, and I think they are absolutely right, because the biggest concern raised with us by the animal welfare charities is not so much actually the problem of puppy farms, it's more the problem of backstreet breeders who are completely unregulated, completely unlicensed, and in many cases are people who are totally not right to be breeding dogs at all, and in the worst cases actually maltreat the puppies to make them violent and give them violent traits for so-called status dogs. I think this is a major concern, and it's why at the end of last year my noble friend the Lord de Morley brought together a group under the Pet Advertising Advisory Group. They put in place a voluntary code that has been running since the beginning of the year, and I can tell honourable members today that since that code was put in place, 100,000 adverts have been removed from the internet. And I pay tribute to the work done by those internet companies that have acted responsibly here, and also all the volunteers who've taken part in moderating the internet to ensure that we can get this. I hope honourable members will understand that continuing to make progress on the internet, given that we've had 100,000 adverts removed in the last year, continues to be our main priority, given the scale of the problem there. I also wanted to touch on the contentious issue of the 5-litre threshold, which my honourable friend, the chairman of the EFRA Select Committee, raised, and she's right. When I was on the committee, we highlighted some concerns around the fact that the 5-litre threshold was too high. As many of those honourable members who followed this will know, the Breeding and Sale of Dogs Act 1999 actually states that anyone carrying on a business of breeding and selling puppies must have a licence, irrespective of the number of litters they have. However, there was then a second clause, always intended as an anti-avoidance clause, that says irrespective of who owns the puppies on a particular premise, they must have a licence if there is more than 5 litters. And that was to prevent people claiming that some of the dogs belong to their brother or their sister or their father or whatever. However, what's been apparent is that over the last few years, or even since it was introduced, local authorities have taken that 5-litre threshold to be the threshold to work to. And this has been something of a mystery, which we managed to solve last night, because I can say that the reason for that is that at the time that the Act was put in place in 1999 under the last government, the Home Office sent around a circular indicating to local authorities that actually 5 litters in most situations should be taken as the threshold to use. I think I'm going to just finish this point. Since that time, I think it is fair to say, from all of the representations made during this debate today, from the recommendations of the EFRA Select Committee, that is the wrong way to interpret the legislation. Those who are carrying on a business of breeding and selling dogs should require a licence. And so I can confirm to the House today that we will be writing to local authorities to give that new clarity and new guidance so that they can interpret that Act in the way and the spirit I believe the House intends today. I would like to move on, if I can, to the issue of pet shops, which obviously is a key item of the debate today. It's important to recognise that only around 2% of pet shops sell cats and dogs. It's around 70 pet shops in total. They are already regulated and licensed, regulated by the 1951 Pet Animals Act. I know that the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent South asked me to clarify whether local authorities have the power, in addition, to place restrictions on which animals can be sold at a pet shop licensed establishment. I can confirm today that that is the case. They do have the power to restrict the number of animals that can be sold. He asked about the ambiguity and contestability that some people had raised with him on that particular issue. And I ought to just clarify that the intention of that provision is for local authorities on a case-by-case basis to judge whether a particular premises is suitable for a particular animals to be sold. So it is not necessarily for them to change the law, but it is for them to make a judgment and to have considerable discretion to make a judgment about whether it's appropriate for certain animals to be sold on their premises. I also wanted to move on because I'm conscious that the Honourable Member for Coventry North West, I think, made a very important point, which is there is much that can be done within the existing regulations. I agree. In January of this year, in 2014, we contributed, along with the RSPCA, the Dogs Trust and many other charities and organisations, to some model licence conditions that were made available to all local authorities and published by the Chartered Institute for Environmental Health. These included 50 pages of recommendation to the sorts of conditions that should be included in a licence for a dog breeding premises. It did include quite strict provisions on the need for social interaction with humans, and that they should have interaction with humans for the whole of the day if they were there all of the time. In addition to that, in September of last year, September 2013, we also published some model conditions for pet vending. These too set out some strict conditions for pet shops about the need for interaction with staff and humans, and it actually recommends quite specifically that there should be at least 4 times a day when a human spends at least 20 minutes with the puppies that are on sale. So there are some quite important, I think, guidance that we have already put in place on these issues. I would like to conclude by saying that I think we've had a really important debate here. I too have had many hundreds of letters regarding this issue. It's something that's clearly of great importance to the country. We've got 8 million dogs in this country, and we are a nation of animal lovers. I will give way very briefly.
Sorry to interrupt him. Before he concludes, could he respond on the issue that was raised by several members with regard to local authority resources?
Well, on the issue of local authority resources, all I can say is actually I think one of the things about the internet is it makes, for some local authorities, it will make it easier for them to identify where they've got a problem. And one of the things we've done in the new code agreed with the Pet Advertising Advisory Group is that where a licence is held, it must be advertised, and where it's not, contact details should be advertised. And this gives local authorities a ready way to identify where they have the most serious problems. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I think we've had a really good debate, an important debate. The government's really committed to improving animal welfare. I am on a personal level, and I hope the comments I made today will help reassure the House that the government is doing a considerable amount to move this item forward.
To wind up the debate, Mr. Robert Flello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, can I just congratulate all honourable and right honourable members who have taken part in today's debate for the important contribution that they've made, I think, to moving this forward. I think the weight of feeling that I think we've heard expressed in this chamber, I hope sends a very clear message. I think the Minister has heard that message, that actually more needs to be done now. I welcome the clarification that local authorities can act if they feel it is inappropriate in their particular local authority areas for pet shops to sell puppies and kittens, if I've heard him correctly, that they can use the powers under the 51 Act if that's the decision that's taken to stop that. If I can ask him and urge him if he will actually, as part of DEFRA, write to those local authorities, perhaps in conjunction with DCLG, to point out to them that they have that act, that ability to do so. But I would just while mentioning the 51 Act, just highlight the fact that a number of honourable members, right honourable members, have said that the legislation is fine, it's just a matter of enforcement. The legislation is not fine. The 1951 Act on pet shops doesn't talk about the socialisation. Yes, the guidance might. It doesn't require socialisation. It doesn't require that emotional needs other than, again, the guidance talks about a total of sort of, 80 or so minutes a day in a 24-hour period. It doesn't talk about those things. It doesn't deal with puppies being taken and kittens being taken from their mums at 4 weeks. certainly earlier than the 8 weeks, and it doesn't talk about the where's mum, because that's the message, that one of the messages I really want to get across. Do not buy. If that genuinely is not the mum of the litter of kittens or puppies, do not touch it with a barge pole, and think very carefully about where it is you're doing your shopping. Mr. Speaker, the debate has ranged across a whole area, wide range of issues, whole spectrum of issues: irresponsible breeders, microchipping, the internet, foreign imports, all these things. And again, there is requirements of legislation, the requirements of enforcement. I really hope that, I know from our conversations with our front bench, I know with conversations with a whole host of those charities that have been talked about today, that there is a willingness to work with the government, work alongside DEFRA to get this right and get it sorted. Can I finally, Mr. Speaker, close by saying fantastic tribute to Mark and Pup Aid, to all the charities that have been named today. This is the start, this is the foot in the door. There's a lot more we need to do for the sake of all the puppies and kittens out there that are leading horrendous lives, and indeed their mothers that are being raised in the most cruel conditions. This is just the start. There is much more to do, but thank you very much for today's debate. Thank the Backbench Business Committee. I look forward to pestering them in the future for yet more debates on this issue. If hopefully we won't need to, because the Minister will hear what we've said and make sure that we work further together. Thank you.
Order. The question is as on the order paper. As many as other opinions say aye. Aye. On the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.